He realized with a jolt that it had struck without warning. Hero Carterosa jolted awake. Living in the kingdom of Carterosa, memories of his past life clawed their way into his mind. A rush of memory slammed into him. In his past life, he'd been an office worker in Japan. A train packed to bursting, a soul-draining job that swallows your days, and ugly, unfair human relations that stab you in the back. He shattered the chains of his old life and awoke as a prince of a distant country in another world. For one dizzy second, joy exploded through him. He'd become a prince. This country sinks beneath the poverty line. The hero lunged and clashed fiercely with his mentor. Dodge it, the instant mentor's strike. He leveled the blade, its tip aimed dead at his throat. He finally felled his mentor, victory exploding inside him. He slid the blade back into its scabbard with a sharp final click. He crushed his Clurford, the sword instructor and head of the Clurfery clan, in just 2 years. The hero thanked him, but if that man still wielded the ferocious strength of his youth, the hero wouldn't have won. He admitted, with bitter resignation, that his defeat was inevitable anyway. At this pace, not a single enemy will dread him. The hero scoffed. Who'd even want to attack this country? Even if they're conquered, there won't be a thing left to plunder. Other nations toss them aside as dead weight, a desperate country with nothing worth taking. He sprang from the kingdom of Carterosa, a tiny state with only 1,000 souls. He wears the title of third prince, trapped beneath 2 brutal, dangerous elder brothers. And yet the crown could still land on his brow. Everyone else usually celebrates this, but now that it's happening in his country, he seethes with anger. The soil here chokes every seed. Nothing grows and they have no resources. The country isn't just small, it's drowning in poverty. This place was so hopeless, even hope fled. Then he made his choice. He was leaving. He always spouts that line, but the prince deliberately pulled this off. Hero snarled that their soil was barren. Barely any crops could take root. He's racing to expand the area of sown fields at breakneck speed. The residents gasped when the hero dropped in today and swarmed him, desperate to parade every hard-won achievement. They'd been cultivating the land since dawn, sweeping every patch with effortless rhythm. Then a stubborn tree fought back and turned the day into a grueling struggle. Hero demanded, "What kind of tree is it?" They marched him to a towering tree. Even 10 men couldn't contain him, but a single swing of an axe would cut him down. That tree stood here for several hundred years, and Hero's hands won't lift an axe to fell it. If they want to reap the harvest, they'll have to fell it. In this world, magic roars to life only through the blood of a chosen few families. If you have them, you can forge your body into something faster, stronger, tougher. He ripped his sword free and sliced a furious arc into the tree. You lunged and drove your blade straight into the tree trunk. It split in an instant, cleaving cleanly into 2 halves. The residents struck a pact to uproot the obstacle and finish cultivating this patch today. They thrust a steaming bowl of potatoes at the hero. Several workers couldn't refuse and tore in too. By summer, they'll have carved this patch into a full field, and if they plant potatoes, they'll be digging up a winter harvest. Every one of them blazes with genuine, unmistakable goodness. Last winter, they nearly starved to death. This time, Hero won't let it happen. They still lack fields. Now they're carving the land into shape. They grew this potato from seed potatoes brought from another country, and when stubborn tubers sprouted in the weak soil, the country was pulled back from the brink. It exacts a brutal, soul-crushing price from them. Our hero staggered down the hall, every step a battle against bone-deep exhaustion. At dawn, he ripped through sword training. By afternoon, he honed his skills in governing the country, and in the gaps he drove land development and a heap of other projects. Then her voice shattered the silence as she called him. There she was, his sister, and he hadn't seen her in years. The moment she met him, joy exploded inside her. She slipped back to reclaim a forgotten trinket that thrust him into an expedition, so she bolted here. Miali Carterosa, the first princess of the kingdom of Carterosa. She plunged headfirst and laid down her life. At a glittering reception, a prince from a wealthy nation locked eyes with her and swept her into marriage, but only after extracting a promise to send his country's aid to theirs. Because of that, they had far fewer victims last year, and he still replays every brutal hardship from those days. She was his first love, but he couldn't save anyone, so he forced himself to let her go. Her husband is distracted and ugly rumors cling to him. She's thinner than she was when their country had nothing to eat, and he spotted bruises circling her wrist beneath her sleeve. His heart ached for his sister. He tossed out the idea that they at least have dinner together, and she didn't mind. After a tense wait, the table stood perfectly set and ready. They slid a cup of water to her, simmered a soup from the last vegetable scraps, boiled potatoes in salted water, and laid out strips of dried meat. Against the odds, this wound up being pretty decent. Then Miali remembered she'd heard the hero had plunged into business lately, and because of him, they were racing to finish developing even the lands that were supposed to wait until next year. With no patch of soil in sight, he dug like a man possessed to plant the potato she sent, determined not to let her efforts be in vain. She bowed her head, thanked him warmly, then crowned him a good child. Hiro snapped, "Don't call me a child anymore!" Mealy pleaded that he was only a kid and begged him not to do anything stupid. He swore he hadn't meant to. He's not all-powerful. His magic can coax barren lands back to life, and his fierce strength was hammered out by an unforgiving sword instructor. Measured against the whole country, his strength shrinks into pure powerlessness. He burns to save the country, yet stuck as an ordinary office worker. He has no knowledge at all. Can't put anything into practice, and one disaster after another keeps crushing him. Still, he burned to act, hurling himself into reckless, all-out efforts every single day. Mealy yanked him out of his daze with a grin and said, "Don't worry. My little sister will definitely think of something." He begged her to promise she'd come back if he could flood the country with wealth, a feat he knew was impossible. Yet she didn't banish the hope. When she swallows the last bite, she'll slip away, her heart blazing with love for her charming hero. Later, she had already planted herself beside the cart. She'd probably come today to deliver that man's help. The very things her sister sacrificed her life for. Rage exploded inside him as he slammed his fist into the windowsill. The hero burned with a hunger for strength. At this rate, simply trying won't cut it. His blade won't strike and his books won't help. Unless something extraordinary happens, that's the end. He will tear the current situation apart. So is there truly no force suited to his circumstances? A voice ripped through the quiet, promising the answers he'd been hunting. Out of nowhere, a jagged pain lanced through his chest. A vice-like ache clenched his heart. He whipped around. No one stood there. I steeled myself and demanded, "Who's here?" The voice struck him again, declaring him the respondent. Something ripped out of him. Pain fused with searing heat, and a voice declared it had always lived inside him and watched over him. Now, when he begged so hard, it will be forged into his strength, no doubt. In this world, people are born with strange abilities, and if you have one, a sliver of luck lets you command an even rarer force. Magic. A crackling orb of raw magic that spits answers to every question its owner dares to ask. And the one answering is his magic, roaring to life. Later, Hiro sat in his room. The respondent hands you the exact details of whatever the magician sees. The stronger the magic you unleash, the more it reveals, usable only once every 30 days. It was a lifesaver, but a brutal 1-month cooldown kept blowing up our plans. Hiro steeled himself and chose to do what the world needed now, unleashing his magic to pry its secrets loose. He pressed the respondent for a DIY fertilizer he could whip up himself that would be as potent as possible. The answer slammed into him. He needed nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and so on. It was epic, but Hiro snapped, "Name the shops where I can buy all this." The respondent confirmed their magic had maxed out, then, defying protocol, chose to expose their rank as a one-time exception. Fertilizer normally takes ages to make, so they've got an emergency brew on standby for when the hero needs it in a heartbeat. Then he urged them to dive headfirst into studying alchemy. The moment Hiro heard about chemistry, surprise hit him like lightning. The respondent barked, "Use alchemy and the work time gets slashed in half!" Centuries ago, the church outlawed this power and branded it bidden magic. The respondent has the preparation method down, and with alchemy's power can forge it into reality. If he pulls this off, he'll rescue more than just this country. But even this world, every inch of it. The church outlawed alchemy and rolled out bans. He scoffs and defiantly keeps going. To learn alchemy, sprint southeast for about 24 kilometers. In a heartbeat, the respondent beamed the coordinates straight into Hiro's brain. Chronal Kaiser, the legendary alchemist, forged a legacy. Seize it with your own hands. That very night, Hiro plunged into the darkness and launched his quest. Under the storm's roar, he smashed the rock until a hole gaped open. He clambered inside and burst into a hidden cave. This is the place the respondent pointed to. The air pinched cold from no fresh breeze, and he held back from calling on magic to boost his strength because he didn't know how much farther he'd have to go. I plunged deeper into the cave, and it snapped into a narrow passage with a single worn path slicing through the darkness. A colossal door already loomed before him. It looked like a puzzle. Every seam and angle screamed that it wasn't natural. Lucky break. Hiro ripped through the puzzle, solving it in a heartbeat. You ripped into the puzzle plastered on the door, snapping pieces together. When he finished, the puzzle snapped into a button. He slammed it. The door groaned and inched open, creaking as a secret forced its way into the room. Warmth wrapped the inside, and beyond it a room suddenly came into view. Hiro stepped into the room, and a breathtaking view stole his breath. At long last, an heir to Cornell's alchemy has emerged. He'd endured 160 years and 32 days for this moment. Hiro's voice sliced through the hush. Are you Colonel Kaiser, the legendary alchemist? The fact was true, but misleading. It was merely a golem replaying a recorded memory, biding its time here for his successor. Alchemy could pull off the same feat, and Hiro knew the church would brand it a vile desecration. With a voice like grinding stone, the golem blasted that he had no time left. He was a temporary creation, and in 5 days every spell that held him here would shatter. If that was the case, every second was a threat. Hero exploded into motion, refusing to waste a single heartbeat. He burst out, "Teach me alchemy!" Gollum whooped with relief, glad he hadn't dithered, and set out to hammer alchemical knowledge into him in just 5 merciless days. Hero could have sworn a grin was cracking across his face. With food and water nearly gone, he steels himself to power through 5 days of sleepless training, channeling magic to rebuild his strength. The real problem, he'll be away from the castle the entire time. Golem warned that everything he absorbs in these 5 days is just the foundation. After that, he'll have to devour the materials himself. Once Hero masters the basics and locks down the core concepts, he'll explode into independent study and dominate his learning solo. The golem's voice thundered as it asked the youth his name. "Hero Carter Rosa, remember that name?" When the golem heard his last name, recognition slammed into him. Those family traits and those eyes matched someone he'd seen before. I shoved the thought aside and launched into the lesson at full speed. Nothing but joy swelled in the hero as he cried, "Teacher!" That name hasn't crossed anyone's lips in years. 5 punishing days later, he stood triumphant, his training complete. The colonel demanded, "Is the very foundation of alchemy perfect?" You shot back, "Yes." Alchemy ignites when you flood a single sapphire blue gem with shifting waves of magical power, unlike other magic. Alchemy is ritual coding. You trace rigid patterns, flood the script with pulsing waves of magic, and the blue gemstone stands as the compiler that forges it all into power. To forge magic, or code, you need the core tools: function, pointer, array, and parameter. Once you calculate each seal's location, braid their power links together until the forces merge. Smelt and fuse them, and you'll forge matter. A body and a soul. Even rational magic itself. Zoom out, generalize everything, and suddenly it all snaps into this. Relief slammed into the colonel. He'd pulled it off. With anyone else there, teaching him the basics would have been all but impossible. Hero lucked out. His programming skills let him tear through it. If he hadn't, he would have needed days just to grasp the basics. Cronal thundered that no other magic even comes close to alchemy. It's pure logic made flesh and the most beautiful of all magics. Serenity floods him, and he finally walks out the door. He crowned him his successor and handed over a lifetime's worth of hard-won wisdom. He bowed to Hero, thanks spilling from him, and prayed he would clutch even more of this knowledge in his hands, and let him pass the torch to the next generation. Arrow's gratitude burst out as he thanked his teacher. Mark my words, he'll pull it off, no question. He devoured the basics and bent the concept and the idea to his will. Later, he pored over the arcane notes, journals, and battered apparatus the legendary alchemist Cronal Kaiser left behind. He seized the forbidden art of alchemy, banished and erased from this world, and with it he could rewrite reality. 2 years have blasted by since Hero plunged headfirst into studying alchemy. Alchemy is hands-on processing of matter. It demands real material, lets you reshape and refine substances, but it can't turn stone into gold. Tap this convenient magic and, depending on the plan, you can rake in massive sums and become rich. If he only thinks of himself, he'd be better off leaving this kingdom. He could stake out a place for himself anywhere. He refuses. Love for his kingdom burns in his veins. Armed with nothing but this power, he'll drag the kingdom back from the brink. He'll tear his sister back to him. He devoured every scrap of knowledge, and now he's finally about to burst into action. He'll see it through, alone if he must. At least that's what he told himself. She sauntered up, smirked, and jabbed him with one cruel line. "Cry, baby Hero!" Hero's eyes snapped to her. He knew it was Hibana. Hibana Clerford is his granddaughter. She raced to the Kinnar Principality to master swordsmanship, and she's the hero's childhood friend. With her studies finally complete, she raced straight home. Hero pleaded with Hibana to stop calling him a crybaby. He's not the same anymore. Hibana's lips curled into a wicked smirk the instant she heard the request. He roared that at just 14 she already had the skill to earn a place in the Bronze Knightly Order of the Principality of Kinnar. It stood as the legendary Knight Order, a brutal elite circle only top-tier swordsmen could ever join. Bronze might be the lowest tier, but it still blew everyone away. Hero snapped. "Why return when you could join the Bronze Knight Order at your age? That could get you into the Golden Order. Isn't that the highest honor a swordsman can claim?" Hibana heard it and fired a dramatic pout straight at Hero. She swore she came back because their communication pulled her back. If he suddenly says he forgot about him, she'll hit him. The two of them planted themselves in a riot of flowers. She pulled the sobbing Hero into a fierce hug and forced a grin, whispering, "Mealy's getting married. Smile or they'll send us home." But he'd bought her, and she was sobbing too. She loves Mealy too, and she won't stand by and watch her sink into that kind of sorrow. Then the Hero slammed his palm on the table and declared he'd change the kingdom. He can't do it now, but he'll make it happen. Seeing no other way, Hibana steeled herself and became his sword. They forged a vow that bound them both. Disbelief slammed into Hiro. She couldn't believe she'd remembered this. It unfolded as naturally as breathing. Every inch of her wanted to say it, but the words choked back. She stepped back into the kingdom and couldn't fathom who she'd become. As she grew older, a bitter certainty took root that the country could no longer be changed. And every time she stepped outside, the kingdom of Karosa revealed its dangerous, corrupt face. The thought of him abandoning his dream hit her like a punch to the gut. A spark flared in her. She thought joining the Golden Knightly Order would be perfect. The idea should have worked. Yet Hiro still asked how much she was here. From her grandfather's letter, she realized, against every doubt, that Hiro could actually save the kingdom. He refused to quit, charging forward and fighting tooth and nail to make it happen. She thundered back, burning to find out if he'd really thrown away his dream. Surprise slammed into Hiro. He locked eyes with Hisa, and she smiled back. He knew the hero would strike any second, so he slammed a pen to paper and shot the note off to Hibana. He predicted it to the letter. The man who'd watched over him since infancy could never be fooled, and no secret stayed hidden. Back then, as a child, he sobbed non-stop, tears carving tracks down his cheeks. His and Hibana exploded into laughter at this. Hiro clutched Hisa to his side as Hibana exploded back onto the scene. Right now likely stands as the best moment. Hibana then pleaded, "Wait!" She demanded, "How are you going to save this good-for-nothing kingdom?" Curiosity ignited in her, burning hot and relentless. Can he summon the power to pull off what he's plotted? She loves this country fiercely, so she plunges into the fray to salvage whatever remains and is determined to fulfill their promise. If this dream is impossible, they can only tear themselves away and leave it behind. Hiro's eyes flashed as he stepped forward and unveiled something that stole everyone's breath. He hustled them down into the basement. He flung open the doors to a cavernous hall, unveiling a vast library of towering shelves and a buzzing work area. Shock slammed into his and Hibana. Neither of them suspected the castle hid a basement. Hiro had secretly built it beneath their feet. Hibana staggered back as the truth hit. Hiro had crafted every last inch of this, both this room and the passage that funneled into it. It would take decades for a lone builder to quarry, chisel and stack a stone wall, and then string every wire to bring electricity to life. He scoffed. There was no way the carpenters of their kingdom could craft something like that. The hero bellowed that only magic could make it happen. Human strength couldn't touch it. He'd replayed his scheme 1,000 times, yet he never imagined he'd pull together something like this. Surprise slammed into them early. Hira's big reveal was still waiting up ahead. He decided to unleash the fruits of 2 years of desperate training and fevered research. This invention will shake the small kingdom of Carterosa to its core. He threw the door open and they were confronted by a wild wall of green, an overwhelming tangle of vegetation. Inside, wheat had taken root, something the kingdom believed impossible, because their ancestors had waged endless battles to coax it to life, and not one attempt ever bore fruit. This is his testing ground, where he forges and brutalizes prototypes, crafting inventions meant to save their country. One of the finds was wheat, a golden sheaf glinting in the pile. Relentless selection forged its vitality. Now it thrives in frigid climates, shrugs off disease, and explodes with a much faster growth rate. Plant us in spring or early summer and we'll rock it to life. It bursts with sugar, so any bread you bake puffs up pillowy and sweet. Amazed, Hibana blurted, "If I plant it in the ground, what happens? Won't it still grow the same?" Even the most miraculous wheat, without nutritious soil beneath it, flat out refuses to germinate. I vowed to reveal the exact fertilizer feeding this soil. He dragged them into the wheat, and there, tangled in the stalks, lay the monster's corpse. Nightmarish beasts are ripping their homeland to shreds. He said their bodies seethed with miasma, poisoning anyone who ate them and fouling the environment. So Hiro forged the seed. He drove a seed into the corpse, planting life inside death. Suddenly, a sprout shot out of it. Then the buds explode into life, thrusting fresh green from the branches. We incinerate choking miasmas, the instant nutrients surge in and are assimilated. Then the body dries into a brittle husk and crumbles back into the waiting soil. The soil transforms into a nutrient powerhouse, pumped full of the monster's raw energy. My jaw hit the floor. I was completely blown away. That wheat will take root and flourish across this country. The kingdom's soil seethes with bounty, primed to explode into a food export powerhouse feeding the world's largest nations. My pulse spikes. This just got fascinating. This is just the beginning. Armed with that power, he can flip the world on its head. When he swore that promise, he was a helpless child. But now everything's changed. He holds the power to forge his dream into reality. He urged her to honor the vow they'd sworn together. Hibana beamed and snapped a joyful yes. His power will upend the kingdom, and she asks to watch it unfold from a special vantage. She vowed, iron resolve burning, to become his sword. He locked eyes with him, then spun toward the hero. He roared the question again. This basement and its wheat were his. He built it and grew the wheat with his own hands. Hero's voice rang out, a hard, unmistakable confirmation. He snapped. Was all this pulled off with something the church banned several hundred years ago? Still the hero roared, "Nothing can be hidden from me!" They proved it. He wielded alchemy. If anyone finds out about this, the church will spring into action and leave nothing to chance. The hero roared, "Don't worry, I'll nail every move." He's already locked in every decision. He knows it's forbidden, but if it gives him even one shot to save the kingdom, he'll seize it and never look back. He scoffs at the church's influence and charges headlong to defend his beloved cause. His and Hibana gaped at him, disbelief flashing in their eyes. Eros' gaze bristled with ironclad, unstoppable determination. Then a fierce resolve ignited in him. He would help him. I implored him to let me stand by his side and support him. Hibana lunged from nowhere and snatched him up. She yanked him back, snarling that he was always touching the hero. She digs in her heels. His alchemy cements her refusal to change her mind. If anyone dares hurt him over this, she'll kill them. Then he began to lean on them. Hibana dropped to one knee, pledged herself as his knight, and challenged him. "Will you initiate me now?" He thundered that to become a knight she had to go through the official initiation ceremony, and she couldn't be the personal knight of anyone in the royal family. She scoffs, slamming the rule as utterly ridiculous. The royal family must personally ignite the rite, lead the ceremony, and thrust the sword they forged into the knight's grip. Initiation into a knight is sacred, and not a single step may be missed. He threw a public ceremony to brand her his knight. She'd become his secret accomplice, and he needed that cover to move freely. Hibana tossed out a cheap blade for the job, but the hero snapped no. He refused to take it, knowing she'd have to shield him with that flimsy scrap. She smirked and dared him, "Forge me a sword with alchemy." Hero had already been scheming to pull this off. He will forge a blade destined to eclipse even the sacred sword of the Principality of Culinary. He aimed for the impossible. In the Principality of Culinary, only 12 knights of the Golden Order may wield sacred swords. If they can't pull this off, they'll be powerless to fill their kingdom's coffers. Hero implored Hibana to hand him his sword. Use that as your blueprint and forge something new. Seize a battle-worn sword with a solid center of gravity and a long, steady blade. The sword's metal was an iron-based alloy, the blade hammered and honed to a mirror edge, and he kept wondering how many decades he'd have to train in blacksmithing to make a sword like that. It feels like a cheap shot. He's dragging magic into this. He leaned in, eyes locked on Hibana, and asked, "What do you need this sword to do? Any specific requirements?" Her style hinges on blinding speed. She slices to wound, not crush, so the ideal sword is light enough to keep her intensity roaring, with the blade trimmed a touch shorter and the balance dropped just a hair. The demands snowballed into an avalanche the hero hadn't seen coming. He nodded anyway, plunged his hand into his pocket and pulled the thing free. He snapped into a stance and began weaving the spell. He locked onto the two subjects, every fiber of his mind fixated on them. Magic flared to life, spiraling and crackling around the tiny object. His other hand sparked to life as a second sword blazed into being. He matched Hibana's sword blade for blade, every gleam and edge exactly the same. He channels the bracelet's power. And the sword? It's forged from mithril, the legendary metal of myth. This is alchemy, the brutal art of tearing reality apart and forging it into whatever you want. Hibana stepped in front of the knight statue and launched a savage swing straight at him. She lunged, driving her sword straight into him. A thunderous crack split the statue in an instant, cleaving it into two jagged halves. A bolt of disbelief hit Hibana, snapping her breath away. She slashed the statue and felt nothing, a hollow calm swallowing every pulse. Hero gaped, stunned. Without a single magical strength spell, she cleaved the statue clean in two. Hibana ached to unleash her true strength and make him witness it. Her bearing screams mastery over magic, yet she's never unleashed a single spell until now. She snapped around and locked eyes with the hero. She reached for the mithril sword and begged to take it. The hero snapped no and refused on the spot. That sword's his. He loaned it to her just for now, until he needs it back. He implored her not to drown in despair. He swore he'd forge her a sword that would eclipse this crude experimental blade. He'd forge it from the stockpile he'd hidden away. She snapped. She couldn't wait for it another heartbeat. Her hunger for the sword blazes so fiercely she refuses to be disappointed. Hero plunged into the forge, hammering glowing steel into a sword for Hibana. He forges blades from rare, almost sacred metals. He refuses mithril when he's crafting a truly devastating sword, using only the finest materials. "Don't you dare call these metals!" When he turned those monsters into fertilizer, their fangs and hides became metal-like, iron-hard, tacky as resin, and stubbornly unbreakable. Heroes imbue their swords with magic. Monsters sear their weapons with it too. Every blade is bound tight to arcane power. This magic sword, forged from a monster's corpse, is insanely powerful. But it chews its wielder apart with a poisonous miasma. Only a select few can actually wield the magic sword, titans strong enough to command it. And when miasma invades a body, Alchemy's entire aim is to purge that poison. The miasma roared inward, condensing into a crackling, pulsing orb. She snapped into the ball, curling herself tight in an instant. The crystal ball, an alchemical tool forged to purge miasma, brimmed with the very miasma it was meant to annihilate. He tucked it away for the future. Then the monster's material, freed from miasma, is smashed into shards with a special hammer he forged by hand and melted down. Try the ordinary forge and you'd need a gigantic furnace and special chemicals. He unleashes 3 savage monsters, Big Bear, Hunting Dog, and Golden Eagle. They're titanic monsters. Melt and meld every piece until they fuse into one colossal being, and the right mix turbocharges their synergy. The respondent revealed a way to fuse monsters into a blade, and he boasted he could forge a sword to rival the Culinary Principality's sacred blade, fueled by 2 years' worth of knowledge he'd siphoned from that same respondent. Next, they'll mold the sword with magic, just like Hibana asked, locking in its center of gravity, carving out the blade's length, and sculpting its final look. He forged it into a thing of breathtaking beauty. It's chilling to imagine this masterpiece becoming a murder weapon. Now comes the last step. Etch runes that mean cutting into the blade and unleash the sword's true power. Then unleash the enchantment. This is real alchemy. Magic floods the material, fusing with it and igniting its essence into something far more potent. Enchantment poured into the base cut, and the sword roared to life, swelling with power as its base hardened into unbreakable strength. It blossomed into something incredible. Hibana will erupt in pure uncontrollable joy. Hibana Clifford's knighting kicked off. She swore her sword answered only to Prince Hero. She breathed a trembling thank you to Hero for forging her into the finest sword. She'd never seen a blade so beautiful and powerful. Her cheer had drained away, so he leaned in and snapped, "So you don't like it?" She admitted, voice raw, that nerves had her by the throat, and she feared the whispers that would follow if she didn't do well. The hero roared, "Hibana can never fail!" Odds are no one even blinks that the third prince keeps a knight like that at his side. Hibana, Hisa's granddaughter, was forged in the Principality of Culinary. As a knight, she leaves no one a reason to complain. Everyone here has witnessed Hibana's true strength. I crave her service, and plenty here covet her too. Too bad for them, that truth didn't hold. Hibana's his friend. They swore one promise. She's his partner. The raw strength that refuses to let him fall. At last, he can surge into motion. He's got a mountain of missions to tackle with his comrades by his side. 2 players still burn to leap into the spotlight and act. Hibana's voice flared with fierce gratitude as she thanked Hero for knighting her and vowed to guard his sword with her life. But she wasn't empty-handed. She had something for him. It blindsided him. Then she whipped the toy sheep into view. She snapped, "That's his respondent," even though it looked like nothing more than a flashy accessory. When he fires up responder, it comes off like he's muttering to himself, a quiet ache tugging at her. And she wonders what would happen if someone else took over as responder. She snatched the toy, slipped into his voice, and said hello to Hero. He hesitated, jaw clenching, and said he'd weigh whether he'd use it. I barreled over to her and demanded what she was doing, and she snapped back, "I'm training!" He froze, pulse spiking. She was doing it right there in the room with him, and he couldn't tear his eyes away. She declared nothing could be done. Bound by her oath as his knight, she would stand fast at his side. Becoming someone's sword means she must crush every rival and rise to be the strongest. If she doesn't grow stronger, then she's a liar. She knows 8 people stronger than her, and she has to catch up, devouring every scrap of free time with brutal training. She swore she could take down 4 knights of the 12 Golden Order from the Principality of Culinary. And for the hero, her mere presence was all he needed. Even stuffing every purse couldn't snare the Bronze Knights. Good thing Hibana had his back. He pressed the sword into her hands with a cocky grin and asked, "So, how do you like it?" Whenever she smiled, the sword roared with unstoppable power. You can cleave an enemy with a sword, only if he wields no sacred or magic blade. Shrug off the woman in simple armor. She's his knight and needs a sword. He felt it in his bones. She could handle him. Today could be the day she finally gets to practice. Arrow barked, "Get ready! We're leaving now!" They were seconds from bursting out of the castle. Out of nowhere, a man loomed in the doorway. Who dared ask Hero where he was going? Agatha's brother loomed before them, Cartarosa, the Cartarosa Kingdom's 2nd prince. Agatha caught sight of the hero, always hunting the people's cheers, chasing popularity. Secretly a prince, he kept making bold new discoveries while masquerading as the town doctor to hide his identity. He snapped, "What will you do next time?" As wild rumors swirled all around them. He stormed over to see what the hero was doing after he'd tried to hand out the wheat. The hero inches forward with razor focus. There's nowhere to hide from him. He swore off chasing popularity. He only wanted to make this kingdom rich. Agatha seethed. Certain Hero would eliminate him and his brother Takuma to snatch the throne. Hero snapped again. I'm not doing that. Even if everyone excels in different fields, in politics he crumbles beside Agatha. She's clearly the one fit to wear the crown. When the situation calls for a strong king, Takumu's older brother, brave and a razor-sharp strategist, still can't rise to it because his talent is incomplete. Agatha staked everything on Hero. This kingdom survives only because Mayali and Hero hold it together. He'd already braced himself. Brother Agatha would blurt out something just like that. Then he snarled that the hero was trying to vault over his head and bury his tracks. He won't pull it off. The hero slammed his fist down and demanded he stop rambling and get to the point. Agatha can't be handed to his hated younger brother. Agatha scoffed. He's still not cute. Brother Tsukumo tasked me with passing this on. On the eve of his 14th birthday, the kingdom brands him an adult, thrusting him into imperial service as a monster slayer. The command booms, prepare. Agatha's eyes snapped to Hero. He'd grabbed a single knight for himself. A risky move when assembling a whole squad would have been far smarter. Arrow leaned in, voice sharp, and snapped. Are you worried about him? He snapped no. The thought of having to look after him would be pure torture. Hero slammed his fist into his palm and growled, Don't worry. I'm strong, just not as strong as Takumu's brother. Change never touched him. Agatha's gaze snapped to the girl. Bloodlust radiated off her like heat, raw and brazen, and she didn't even try to hide it. He closed the distance and asked, Do you want to come to me? Hibana's breath hitched. The proposal blindsided her. Understanding slammed into Hero. He finally knew why he'd come here. Brother needs a knight like Hibana, who stormed straight into bronze rank. Agatha swore she'd arm her with a weapon far deadlier than Hero's. Hibana rejected it outright. He'd be a walking snooze. She's already sworn to become the hero's sword. Pity pricked Agatha, while far off a strange man zeroed in on another strange man. He spun on his heel and strode away. Then a memory slammed into him. He snapped at Hero. If my plan ever needs you at a moment's notice, you call me. Immediately. This is the real reason he set foot here. If Takumi seizes the crown, everything will end. And to unleash that final doom, they must unite. Chances are he's plotting to turn Hero into a pawn, vault past Takumu's brother, and seize the throne. Only he can truly unleash Hero's inventions. He crafts marvels, not warriors, so he needs Agate's power. The offer hit like a jackpot, impossible to refuse. He said he'd think it over. If Agatha truly wanted to help, his aid would prove useful. Agatha leaned in, breath held and eyes locked on him, waiting for him to deliver the correct answer. Indignation seared through Hibana. He flung a careless invite with a grin, and that levity shut her out. She could never understand him. The hero's gaze cut through doubt. He knew Agatha was sincere. He tossed out just enough common sense to seem honest, but Hibana still saw through him and branded him a liar. He relentlessly badmouthed the hero, and a bitter rift yawned between the brothers. No one can say for sure if he's even one of them by blood. One day his father yanked him out of nowhere and bellowed that the hero was his son. Seething with fury, the brothers watched as a child of unknown origin held the right to inherit the throne. A bolt of memory struck the Bana. He remembered exactly what he'd just said. She asked again, voice cracking. Hero refuses the crown. He doesn't want to be king. It fit him perfectly. As prince, the crown let him bend the world to his will. If he takes the throne, the crown will swallow his time for alchemy, and he'll pin every failure on his brothers. Hibana believed the crown would be his. Her instincts are razor sharp, and she burns to become the king's knight. Then they decided to go. Today they'd need her strength. The strength she carried with fierce, unshakable pride. Hours later, they burst into the forest, swallowed by a sudden living hush. No, this wasn't just any woods, this was the Devil's Forest. Here she can truly go toe-to-toe with hulking, powerful monsters. Hibane's grin cracked wide. Simple training never pushed her to grow, so this thrilled her. Those are bold words to toss around in a place this deadly. Devil's Forest. A cursed wood where nightmarish fiends make their lairs and brood, ready to unleash colossal devastation across the surrounding lands. Even when a monster falls, its body turns useless. They must abandon the carcasses in the forest, heaping a crushing burden on the kingdom of Carterosa. Hibana cocked her head, fire in her eyes, and snapped, Are you sure this outfit will work on a stealth mission? Hero proclaimed he'd forged these clothes using alchemy. He spun it from the thread of an insect monster and poured into it the very same enchantment he'd bound to her sword. The threads were almost steel-hard, shielding him like armor. Hibana lunged and drove her knife at the hero, determined to see if she could pierce him. She hadn't cut him at all. Hero snapped, Why didn't you believe me? If it were only a near miss, he'd already be dead. Her voice cut like a blade. Anyone who feeds lies when lives hang in the balance must die. She demanded, "He's not dead, so what's the problem?" They hammered this into her in the Principality of Culinary, a place where only the strong survive. Realization slammed into him. As her master, he had to uproot her bad habits, and it would be a brutal battle. Hibana grinned, confessing the hero had been her childhood friend, and talking to him felt effortless. Hearing that, a small thrill surged through him. Hibana snapped, "Why did you come here?" A jolt rips through him. He'll realize he'd said nothing and decide to unleash two blistering reasons. First, he marches in to see with his own eyes exactly what resources lie here. She stared, jaw dropping. Could ore deposits really be hiding in this forest? It was possible, but he burned to know what kind of monsters lurked here. Monsters aren't just threats. They're raw resources begging to be hunted and harvested. I turned the monsters into fertilizer. Their clothes and even Hibana's sword were forged from monster flesh and bone. With alchemy, he binds monsters to his will. They're the kingdom's only resource. She nodded, leaned in, and asked if he wanted to know what kinds of monsters prowled here, and what they were capable of. He confirmed it. They would plunge deeper into the forest. She warned Hibana that if fear suddenly clawed at her, she could slip away calmly. The monsters they'd fought were weak, having lost the fight for territory. Nothing compared to the far stronger beasts lying in wait deep in the forest. She snarled that she couldn't run away. Her blood boiled with fury, and she'd finally get to test her baby in action. Relief crashed over me the moment I heard from her. They slammed up against the barricades. Beyond them, deadly monsters lurked, ready to pounce. Memory slammed into Hibana, and she snapped. "What's the second reason?" He declared that every sacrifice, every desperate act taken to save this kingdom matters. Confusion slammed into Hibana. She couldn't make sense of his words. Guards swarmed up, zeroed in on Prince Hero, and demanded to know what they were doing, then ordered him to leave. This place was too dangerous. He flashed a grin, told them not to worry, then shot out the question. Did anyone there recognize his sword? He boasted his knight towered over him in strength, so there'd be no problems. He implored them to let them through. It was a very important matter. They devoured every word, then urged him to rein it in. They urged them to be more careful. Suddenly, the distant clank of armor ripped through the silence. They couldn't dodge the conversation forever. Sooner or later, they'd have to face it. He wasn't about to cross paths with him that early. The guards threw their gates open, and there he stood, a man backed by a thunderous army. He barreled back unscathed. He emerged. Takumu Cartarosa, the Cartarosa kingdom's first prince. Takumu's world screeched to a halt. He never expected to run into Hiro here. He hadn't seen it coming and blurted, "Are we really going to kill monsters?" He snarled, "This is a battlefield, don't show up unprepared." Then there's no turning back. He arrived fully equipped and ready. Takumu declared he could do whatever he wanted, but he wouldn't lift a finger to help. The only thing that mattered was that he didn't die. If she's here, death can't lay a finger on him. Hiro roared that his knight had been absolutely incredible. Takumu cut in and declared he'd already known the hero and Agatha were fighting. The truth slammed into him. Only a few hours had passed. Agatha shouted that they were collaborating with him, baiting Takuma's attention away. Takumu barked, "Don't do anything unnecessary. Keep this kingdom from getting rich until the right moment." Hiro's mind snapped to the imminent danger. The neighboring country was about to attack them. Right now, no one bothers to seize them. Their kingdom's worthless, not even a coin to tempt a captor. Their rich lands teemed with people until a neighboring power surged in and seized the kingdom. Now the last sliver of territory clings to the edge of the Devil's Forest. If a single thing in this territory holds value, the militant neighbors will pounce and snatch it away. He swore to his brother that when the moment came, he'd seize the captured lands back. But their forces were outmatched, and even if he reclaimed the territory, they couldn't hold it. Takuma's brother is determined to reclaim the lands that once fed most of the kingdom. If those lands are reclaimed, harvests will swell, the population will boom, and the kingdom's problems will begin to crumble. The moment the land is reclaimed, retaliation explodes. You can't win a head-on war against a country with twice the population. But Takumu's likely clutching a short-term ace that can snatch victory, not a totally doomed gambit. Right now he's stockpiling power, and when the moment comes, he'll unleash his plan without fail. Unless they pull off something extra. If the enemy catches wind and pounces before he can decide, everything will be lost. Listen up. If they get in his way, he'll cut them down without mercy, even if they're his brothers. He's the kingdom's only hope. When they deal with Agate, he'll be powerless to lift a finger. They're razor-sharp, eccentric guys. The kingdom's survival hinges on them. A nervous edge prickled the air. Then one by one they started to slip away. Hiro exhaled and strode farther away. Warning, if he keeps this up, death is inevitable. Yet he clutches his hands and refuses to let them go. Thinking that the only way to make a kingdom rich is to win a war is, in a sense, correct. Brother Agata reads Brother Takumu like an open book and braces himself, razor ready. The odds of defeating the neighboring countries are slim, and they won't be able to keep winning. He knows it in his bones. Handing everything to Takuma would sign their death warrant. He refused to lift a finger for the man he hated, even as he readied himself to stop him. Agatha and Takumu set out to save the kingdom by opposite paths. Takumu vows to become a vassal of a powerful country to win its protection from neighboring nations, while Agatha regards him as an immovable obstacle she can't overcome. Destiny hurls them into conflict, two brothers clashing, each hell-bent on saving the kingdom in his own way. Even though their hearts blaze for the same prize. He jolted. Hibana had gone quieter. The instant she laid eyes on him, she felt his power. But the second he grabbed a weapon and stepped onto the battlefield, that power blew up into something ferocious. He understood her in a heartbeat. He was the kingdom's strongest man. He could even topple a Golden Order knight, if they're fighting with the exact same weapons. The hero snapped. "Is this true?" The power was undeniable, but it stopped short of that magnitude. If he's dead set on killing Hiro, Hibana will have to take him on. He asked if she could beat him. She declared he'd wait 3 minutes. The hero saw it all clearly and resolved to steer clear of a brutal showdown with his brother. If there's a collision, she'll snatch the seconds he needs to slip away. It was a stark hint of how he'd die. If there was any way to sidestep the conflict, he'd take it. He'll rely on Brother Agatha to unleash his inventions across the land. After they spread, he'll summon Brother Takumu and his army, and their kingdom will swell with riches. He's hell-bent on arming his brother's army with devastating weapons forged through alchemy. "I also swear I'll return the captured lands." They'll wield raw military might to pry the lands back and lock them down. He craves Takumu's power and the unstoppable force of his army. "My brothers are incredible and fiercely willful, but extracting a straight answer from them is like trying to catch lightning." Hibana watched the sun's rays struggle through the gloom, barely skimming the ground. At last, they plunged headfirst into a relentless hunt for monsters. Takuma's brother burst in, cutting them off mid-conversation, and she snapped that he still had to explain the second reason. A memory stabbed at Hiro, but he shoved it aside and announced the trip's second reason. The second reason slams into view: salt. Hibana's jaw snapped open the instant she heard about salt. She snapped, "Are you talking about the salt buried in the Devil's Forest of the Rocky Mind?" Hiro snapped that a sea was hiding just behind the forest he'd spotted on the great alchemist's map. Ivano froze, shock tearing through him the instant she heard about the sea. She grinned. If the map was true, they could scoop up endless rock salt from the neighboring kingdoms and slam into a whole new market. Every detail checked out, so they had to stop wondering if the sea existed and face the undeniable truth. It's there, and they must engineer a safe road across it, because this is vital. Monsters prowl these woods and the roads twist into treacherous mazes. Even ordinary soldiers fall here, so he built a compass. He slotted a crackling magic arrow into this compass and vows to test it on the fly during the search. It zeroes in on its exact position by reading the 2 stones, both pointing the same way. He whooped with relief after confirming the ordinary compass refused to work. Hibana sank into a glass-cold calm, shutting out every trouble that tried to claw into her thoughts. She quipped, "Monsters terrify me." The moment they remembered the monster, she heard a noise slice through the air. At the last second, her gaze locked onto it. A once-in-a-lifetime golden opportunity landed at their feet. Hiro snapped for Hibana to stand aside and watch. No interference. She swallowed her protector's instinct and agreed, desperate to see what his powers could do. He dove in, ripping the mithril from its old shape and bending it into a fierce new form. The mithril flared to life and twisted itself into a gleaming bow. He then launched into transmuting gunpowder and forged the explosive arrow Red Lotus. He unleashed the 5th form transformation and conjured a blazing magic bow. He stunned everyone with a surprise victory, forging a bow of mithril and an arrow loaded with gunpowder. He plunged headfirst into razor-sharp analysis. A magical vision exploded into his own right eye. Pour your magic into the spell and your eyes ignite with razor-sharp insight, letting you predict a creature's next moves and see straight through it. He mapped the monster's muscle layout, locked onto its center of gravity, and instantly reads the exact movements it's about to make. Then he resolved to unleash a roaring gale. He loosed an explosive arrow, his bow spitting it into a screaming arc. The monster had already pounced on him. Against all odds, the arrow found its mark and slammed into his head. A second later, the monster detonated, unleashing a thunderous blast that tore the air apart. Ebena's breath hitched as she realized the hero had pinpointed the monster's leap and detonated it mid-jump. He sealed the magic, and with one crushing blow, the trapped power ignited the gunpowder. The monster fought with brutal, ironclad tenacity, and without that move, they would have had no chance of winning. Silence shattered as a fresh rustling rose behind Hiro again. He then slammed the bow, and it snapped into its second form, the magic spear. Her jaw dropped. The hero wasn't a swordsman. He boasted he was an alchemist who could bend everything he forged to his will. Snipe foes from the horizon with your bow. Dominate the mid-distance clash with a spear. He wields a sword for close range. If they get too close, he draws a knife for protection. Parries with a shield, then swings a hammer for a crushing blow. That weapon wore 1,000 faces. Mithro erupts into a thunderous magic transformation. It was insanely cool, but Hibana swore the rules forbade him from wielding a weapon that could change its form. Hibana shoved him aside. He only knew one kind of weapon, so he'd be stuck clinging to your sword and turn into dead weight. She planted herself squarely in front of the bear monster. She lunges, her sword flashing as it severs his paw clean off. She lashed out, her sword arcing toward the bear's leg. She barreled straight at him once more. Sever this head clean off! You can cleave his limbs from his body with a single strike. He and Hiro's values were worlds apart. Believe it or not, it still holds its own. Breath froze in his throat. Her sword technique was breathtaking. He snapped, eyes blazing. Are all the people in the Principality of Culinary monsters like her? She snapped. We still have 8 others who are stronger than me. Yet they loom, a lethal threat to them. She asked why he thought so, since they were not at odds with each other. Right now, the kingdom of Katarosa means nothing to them. But the moment he turns it into a treasure trove, the game flips. They can raise Katarosa while it's weak and pillage every invention he's made. He covets the landmark. Fortifying the kingdom matters just as much as filling its coffers. A kingdom so unstoppable it could lay waste to the Principality of Culinary. If they reach that power, no one could ever beat them. True to his station, the prince's thoughts raced over matters like that. She implored us to take these claws for them. They're razor sharp. He whips out a special miasma bag reserved for this exact moment. If he hadn't plunged in, the miasma would have claimed them. Hibana snapped. Do they need treatment? Hiro snarled that pulling this off would drain his magic, and he's saving every scrap for the forest's true needs, so he can't. She hoisted 30 kilograms like it weighed nothing, ready to go. The hero isn't done with this forest. Hibana's itching to throw them into a showdown with a far stronger monster. He grabbed her sleeve and asked if she knew it was called the Blade Bear. They say anyone who meets it dies. It's A rank and extremely dangerous monster. He dwarfed him with brutal, overwhelming strength. It slammed into me. With Hibana shielding him, nobody could kill him. She was a rock-solid knight. At last, they reached the sea's edge. Salt sliced the air, waves roared in her ears, and Hibana froze. At first, she couldn't believe they'd reached the sea. The moment the sea came into view, inspiration hit him like a thunderbolt. That's salt. Cart it off this land and they'll line their pockets selling it to neighboring countries. Half a day of relentless travel, and it was worth every second. He turned to Hibana and asked, How much more can you carry? She's already heaving about 50 kilos of monster material and ready to hoist another 50. She shot back. Are you asking just to know if I managed to save you? I can't keep piling that pressure on myself. They seize 100 kilos of salt. He grabs 50 of it and hefts it himself. Hibana snapped. Do you really have to take all of that at once? We've already found the sea. He declared that if they hauled a full 100 kilos in one sweep, it would be a glorious gift for the kingdom. Every person devours about 1.5 kilograms of salt a year. 1,000 people demand 1.5 tons. 15 deliveries of 100 kilograms each will refill the kingdom's annual salt store. To cut through the hassle, he'll throw caution to the wind. He sprinted against the sinking sun, praying he'd gather the salt before nightfall. He urged them to begin making salt. Hibana stepped up, asking what she could do to help, and he cut her off with a single sharp later. Deciding to fish while she waited, she instantly stripped off her clothes. He froze, incredulous. Could she really feel no shame? She lunged, snatched a fish, and had it ready to eat in a heartbeat. The water beckoned. She asked him if he'd like to swim. He'd make his move only after he'd finished the mission that brought him here. Energy crackled at his fingertips as he readied a spell. He rode, cleaving the water aside. He fused grains of sand into a dazzling glass pool. Her jaw dropped. He actually did it! I shuddered, counting the wasted days they'd have needed if they'd built the pool the usual way. Arrow's jaw dropped, nailed to the spot, his eyes locked on Hibana's swimsuit-clad body. He forced himself to say it. It's too early to be surprised. He'll rip out his own intestines and twist them into a hose, a hideous, stomach-turning sight. Then he'll unleash a torrent to fill the pool. The water sprang to life on its own. Hibana blurted, Is that magic too? It wasn't, just ordinary science. Everything here runs on the siphon principle. Seawater surges from the high sea straight into the low, waiting pool. It then devours the sea, transmuting seawater into glittering salt. She asked, incredulous, It's all alchemy, and it doesn't take much magic? He snapped that they couldn't wait for the water to dry on its own, so there was nothing they could do. The water hissed into steam and vanished, leaving nothing behind but a crust of salt. They snagged salt, and Hibana burst into a victorious dance. But then the hero lunged forward and resumed pouring water. Salt makes up just 4% of seawater, and he knows, down to the last drop, exactly how much to pour to fill the pool to the brim. Crank up the salt's concentration and pump up the quantity. Harvesting it becomes massively more efficient. He began chanting it over and over. The truth struck him. Unleashing that much magic again and again was brutally draining. Suddenly, Hibana's hand shot to his brow, swiping the sweat from his forehead. She thrust some water into his hands. She warned him not to push himself if sickness hit suddenly, and urged him to rest. But the hero will be crushed any second now. If they don't snatch it this instant, every ounce of its power will vanish. He implored Hibana to help him gather the salt. A bag is threaded through my whole body, woven into me, and it stretches like elastic. Hibana sawed the log into rough planks. Then they pressed those boards into service and began hauling in the salt. She gasped, incredulous. Salt's really that easy to make? Handle every step by hand, no alchemy, and watch the job swallow at least a full week. She clenched her jaw, counting how many brutal training sessions she'd need to push her magic that far. Nothing but blind luck made Hiro come into the world already bursting with raw magical power. He's a walking miracle of magic, and there's a respondent that gulps his power. The more magic it swallows, the more information it spits out, and he alone can squeeze it dry and use it to its fullest. A flicker of envy burned in Hibana as she snapped, "Why didn't you just gather all the salt with magic?" They charged back into the devil's forest. Fearing his magic might not be enough, he apologized and braced to get his hands dirty. She saw it all and treated it like another training session. This would be an epic one. Lugging heavy bags and charging through the forest. She snapped to attention. Something had just sounded right here. The prince was strange. He shouldered a pickaxe and toiled side by side with the peasants, carving out brand new roads. It hit him, he confessed, grinning that he was a total oddball. Hearing that, admiration exploded in her. He's an amazing guy. Maybe she can do the same. Forging your body while lifting others. Nothing matches that rush. Embarrassment flared that it had reached her, and a secret grin betrayed how glad he was. Then he swore he'd crown her a heroine. The sea glittered at his feet, salt begging to be made. And he did nothing. He couldn't brave this devil's forest alone. She threw in with him. Now they can hand out salt to the people. Gratitude roared from him as he thanked her for her help. A tiny blush crept across her face, then a grin broke out, pure, unstoppable happiness. She thanked him, elated to be his knight. He would actually be able to save the kingdom. They bolted back home, determined to deliver salt to the people. When they finally stepped out, night had already swallowed the streets. Hibana's eyes snapped to barricades rising like jagged teeth ahead. Turns out she still packs a devastating reserve of strength. They'd been trekking for hours. Exhaustion finally caught even her. She cut through the moonlight like it was daylight. Her training made it possible, and Hiro stalked beside her, guided by magical vision. It hit her. They'd barely run into any monsters along the way. All of this ignited the moment he sprayed that perfume. It hit her. The hero's new invention had obliterated their sweat stench, the one scent monsters hated most. "It's only a trial sample and it's already showing results," she blurted. "Wouldn't using this while traveling make everything so much easier?" He unleashed them to probe what kind of monsters prowled here. He'd avoid using those spirits if he could, but exhaustion and the situation made refusing them a deadly gamble. 11 types of monsters stalk the forest. These perfumes fail against 3 of them. Some monsters aren't repelled by the scent, others have no sense of smell, and he learned a lot. He wants ordinary soldiers to blaze through this forest unscathed using spirits. That test existed for precisely that. Hibana seized every word he spoke, understanding snapping into place. He discovered monsters were real, tested the compass, found the sea, boiled the seawater down into salt, tested the perfume on his wrist. Today was brutal. The moment that will change everything is about to ignite. Hibana opened her mouth to demand what he meant. Then the guards' shouts sliced the air, calling for Prince Hiro. Panic clawed at them. They'd been gone far too long. He blurted a hasty apology for asking at that hour, then sprinted toward the castle. He had to get there immediately. The brothers were definitely awake. Hell-bent on saving the country, he can't wait until tomorrow, so we send them sprinting to tell Takumu and Agatha that he has salt. Takumu and Agatha planted themselves among the guards, the room crackling with tension. Dead center, bulging sacks of salt demanded attention. Just then Hiro burst in with Hibana at his side, and she greeted them. Agatha snapped. "He called everyone, then he sauntered in late himself." Hiro apologized, choking on the words, covered in grime they needed to change. He blurted, "Does salt have anything to do with this?" Panic rippled through them the moment they realized he'd found the salt. Here, every heart guards a burning dream all its own. First Prince Hakumukar Tarosa, the kingdom's mightiest warrior, vows to save his realm by force, reclaiming the rich lands stolen by neighboring kingdoms and liberating the people who live there. Second Prince Agatha Cartarosa, cold and razor-sharp, plots to save the kingdom not with swords but with diplomacy, offering it up as a vassal to a mightier nation. Hero Cartarosa stands as formidable as his brothers, while the third prince is nothing but a spare, an extra brother kept in reserve. He'd been free to do whatever he wanted until now, but when the chance to give salt to the people came, he seized it. Today he storms forward to fight for his dream. Takumu cut to the chase and demanded, "Where did you get the salt?" Hero thundered that beyond the Devil's Forest a sea stretched, where he dug a pool and vaporized the salt. I'd believe it, only if it were true. How many lives has salt snuffed out? The neighboring nation demanded salt. They hawked their treasures just to buy it. They're short on supplies, they throw food away, and their people starve to death. The kingdom starves for salt. The lie about it spits on every tear. Hero snapped that he wasn't rotten enough to lie about salt. Realization exploded inside Takumu. He understood everything. They erupted in thunderous praise, hailing him for it. Confronting a man gunning for the throne and forcing him to own his victories is a dangerous gambit. He won't see it coming. But now's the moment to hit him with the question. He strode up to Takumu and asked for just one thing. With Hibana beside them, only they can blaze a path through the Devil's Forest. If something happens to them, the salt will never be delivered, and they must not be left without it. He slammed his fist down and demanded, "Give me your army!" Takumu's answer came in a heartbeat. Tomorrow he'd handpick his top fighters, dispatch them, and personally bid them farewell. Hero practically glowed. Takumu was coming, and he couldn't wait to teach him how to make salt. Soldiers forged by his brother's hands stand at his back. Lucky they never questioned him. Agatha snapped, "Are you out of your minds?" This was the Devil's Forest, a place that swallowed the lost and swarmed with deadly monsters. The kingdom teetered on the brink, and they couldn't squander their soldiers' lives. Unlike Takuma, he seized it instantly. He'd scored spectacular results. Takuma is dead set on securing a steady salt supply. Agatha shrugs it off, but he needs to be convinced or everything will spiral into chaos. The hero barked, "Calm down." He turned that shove of order into a spark and forged magical devices. The enchanted compass never fails to point them home, so they can't get lost. And when its spirits are called, 3 of the 11 monster types recoil and won't dare come near. Only the elite squads should be able to take on the final 3 types. He's cataloged every monster and every weak spot. Staring down these new monsters, he's utterly lost, helpless, and can't do a thing about them yet. Takumu sided with Hero. He and his knight had pressed through every mile together and proved the compass and the spirits actually worked. Kumu snapped, "Couldn't his army pull off what the hero did to me? If that's what Agatha meant, he'll erupt, treating it as a straight-up insult." Agatha snapped that the hero's words couldn't be trusted. Takumu jabbed a finger at the towering pile of salt the hero had hauled in, and Agatha still refused to believe there was a sea beyond this devilish forest. They'll pull their subjects back from the brink. When the last words landed, Agatha's voice cut through the silence. She agreed. He knows salt comes first, everything else can wait. I forced myself to ask Kuro how he'd known a sea was hiding behind the forest. He won't set foot in that deadly place until he's scoured every inch of the sea he found. There has to be a reason he's so sure. How did he churn out that much salt in one day, and why did he make tools to travel the forest? This is all for a reason. He'd always dazzled and terrified, but now he's gone way too far. He glared and demanded Hero explain himself, or he'd refuse to believe him. This time, Takumu threw his lot in with Agatha. Hero couldn't tell. The crowd's roar swallowed his words. He issued one demand, release the guards. That was his condition. Minutes slipped away. The last footsteps faded, and at last it was just them, alone. A guard stood at the door, yet dread coiled in his gut. One day his father ripped the silence open and told him he was adopted. Do they see him as a little brother? He trembles every time they unleash their raw power. They and their brothers envision saving the kingdom in completely different ways, and they both know it. Brothers by blood, they stand as each other's sworn enemies. His wish depends on the power of these two, and hiding his own strength would be a costly mistake. It might still be needed, so he rips off his mask and reveals his secret. The brothers are bent on saving the kingdom. If they're convinced his aid will do it, he'll throw his weight behind them. He trusts the fierce love they have for their realm. He must make them believe this power can save them. He claimed he'd inherited an alchemist's legacy, mastered its secrets, forged tools with alchemy, and deciphered the sea's mysteries from a map tucked inside. They heard it, and suddenly they could banish him from the kingdom. He froze, pulse hammering, desperate to know what they'd do. Takumu will snap. Do you understand that the church has outlawed alchemy? Dying won't be enough to save him now. He'll defy fate and save the kingdom with alchemy. Stand by and it will die before your eyes. They must understand this. Each of them, standing alone, is charging headfirst into a battle they cannot possibly win. Takumu and Agatha pored over it, ignoring it wasn't an option. He turns to Takumu. and asks him to assemble a squad of soldiers wielding enchanted weapons to storm the neighboring countries. The hero caught on instantly. That was a razor-sharp observation. He plans to close the power gap by equipping his elite soldiers with magic swords. Once those enchanted blades bite, they'll dominate the battlefield and he'll seize back the lands stolen from them. This is the vision that consumes his dreams. Poorly equipped but battle-hardened from endless monster fights, they're not enemies of Kinara, yet still field elite units that can outmatch the Golden Knights, but they lack true military power. There was no future here. The magic sword's miasma would literally devour them, so even a fleeting victory would just squander the elite soldiers. Brace yourself. Power will shatter and ruthless vengeance will crash down. He pivoted to Agatha, heart hammering. Would he really plead with mighty nations for protection, even sell the country to save it? Hero unearthed every secret, even the ones about him. Agatha snapped there was no other way to save the kingdom. It was far better than what that idiot Jock was proposing. Hero scoffed, convinced it wouldn't change a damn thing. The kingdom already sacrificed its sister to buy a few more years of life. Now to save itself, what audacious gambit will he pull next? They have nothing. Belonging to someone strips them bare. Sid Agatha, wield diplomacy now. It's the only force that will stop this from happening. He might pull it off, but Hero already sees the edge where he'll break. He only buys them a few desperate heartbeats, and those heartbeats won't save the kingdom. He flat out refuses every plan they pitch. He flat out refuses. Can Hero still pull off saving them with alchemy? He swore he'd carve them another way out, declaring they'd walked away with far more than just salt. He implored Hibana to show him alchemy's true power. She flung the door open and beckoned them inside. She burst into the room, clutching something tight in her hands. As the guard lunged to toss her out, Takumu cut him off and barked, "Let her in!" The girl ripped the rag open, revealing bread tucked beneath. The big reveal? Just white bread. Takumu immediately blurted, "Do they really grow wheat in Kratarosa?" This couldn't be real. To her shock, Agatha was convinced he'd bought it. Alchemy transmuted their kingdom's wheat into bread. We'll bury the monstrous body and turn it into fertilizer. This wheat scoffs at cold and disease and is ready in 3 months. If they don't believe, let the arrow point them to the fields. Wielding alchemy, he shatters his limits and pulls off feats that once would have been impossible. He dared them to try it, swearing he hadn't put a thing into it. Kumu snatched the bread and bit off a chunky mouthful. The bread hit like a flavor bomb, each bite a blast of pure, irresistible deliciousness. We never suspected their kingdom harbored bread this outrageously delicious. Wheat practically grows itself and slams your taste buds with pure, delicious flavor. Flavor explodes. It's miles tastier than anything served in other countries. Alchemy can pull off of that trick too. Hero thundered that alchemy doesn't just enrich life. It sets it ablaze with possibility, and urged Hibana to hand the sword to her brother. Hibana relented, slamming down one ironclad demand. They had to return it later. Takumu's breath hitched as he stared at the sword, awe exploding inside him. No miasma clings to this blade. It dwarfs their swords, its strength crushing them outright. True to form, Takumu's gaze sliced through the scene. He grasped everything in a single glance. It's pure alchemy. He rips the miasma clean from every magic sword in his squad. No, he'll hone them into something greater and forge blades that surpass them. He declared once more that he rejected Takumu's call to war and Agatha's plan for a colony. He's going to transmute this kingdom into riches with alchemy, turning its salt, wheat, and swords into gold. He'll unveil a rich, fortified kingdom bristling with defenses, ready to repel any invading nation. Armed with all of this, they'll be able to defend themselves. He wants to do far more than just protect them. Their subjects have bled long enough. They deserve to taste real happiness, too. He refuses to settle for merely ending hunger. He's hell-bent on forging the kingdom into a thriving, prosperous realm. Takumu and Agatha locked eyes on him. They exploded into thunderous laughter, their voices crashing together in a wild chorus. Takumu would force his knights to sacrifice their lives, an atrocity that would make his younger brother's alchemy look tame. Agatha clenched her jaw and nodded. They'd be squandering their lives for nothing. They even dared call the hero right. They were only stalling, a delaying gambit that could never deliver the kingdom's prosperity. They felt it in their bones, yet they refused to give up, while he burned with a fierce, desperate need to save the kingdom. A strange grin cracked across his face at the thought that the kingdom would be saved. He outclassed them. Laughter cracked from him, but Hero thought sorrow seeped through every smile. When he saw their burning resolve to save the kingdom, he bared his secret to them. Its form might change, but its meaning stayed the same. He pleaded, voice cracking, "Don't tell me I can handle this alone, and don't erase everything you've done by calling it pointless." He issued one urgent plea to them, help him. He could make this country rich, but he can't pull every string or fight with Takumi's lightning speed. He can't ignite the people's hearts or broker deals with neighboring countries. Alchemy only forges handy tools. Misuse it and it collapses. Everything fails and he needs their power. He declares he wants to use both of them. Agatha branded him stupid. Does he seriously think they'll just fall in line behind him? No, he built it for them to wield. He stakes everything on their unstoppable strength and razor-sharp intelligence. If they stand united, they can save their kingdom. He prowls the shadows, but he needs them at his side. He hurled the crown's fate into their hands and dared them to choose the next king. Takumu and Agatha locked eyes, a single loaded glance passing between them. When the hero speaks, this is the raw truth blazing behind his words. If his younger brother says something like that, he can't swallow his words and sit silent like a child. With Takumu's army at his back, he drops princely pretenses and takes command like a relentless general. Agatha also vowed to help Hiro. She was weaker and hated the thought of following someone who'd only stumbled into the alchemist's legacy. But when their ship began to sink, she had no choice but to drag him to safety. He rockets to his aid and rises to become minister. Hiro snapped. What did you mean? Takumu confessed he'd stepped down from the throne and placed the crown squarely in his hands. Agatha followed suit, throwing her full support behind it so the kingdom would be stronger, and they'd finally recognize him. They'll bury the secret of alchemy. As long as he believes in himself, he can drag their kingdom back from the brink, and they'll stand with him. These are the brothers he's saddled with. They closed in and demanded, "Do you believe him?" If he dares call out whether they're telling the truth, they'll bristle and take it as a direct insult. He then implored them to help him. They beamed and urged him to lean on them. At long last, the three princes of Cardaros assembled as one for the very first time. This isn't the beginning of saving the kingdom of Cardarosa. It's the spark that ignites an era of prosperity. He swore that united they'd be unstoppable, but that confidence was a hollow illusion. You! Morning crashed in, and the hero snapped awake, letting loose a cavernous yawn. Negotiating with his brothers had utterly drained him. He bristled. He hated it. A voice shot from behind, asking if he was heading the right way. Takumu squad and I, gear strapped tight, charged straight for the sea. Relief exploded when they all finally united. They shoved a mountain of duty on him. Master alchemy to fill the kingdom's coffers, whip the army into shape, handle domestic politics, and strike deals with foreign powers. He couldn't pull it off. He hands each mission to the brother built for it, trusting them without a second thought. A single glaring problem loomed. His brothers renounced the throne, and the crown landed squarely on his shoulders. He became the next king. Agatha shouldered the everyday work, but a handful of duties demanded a king's hand alone. Hibana crowed that yesterday was legendary, exactly the kind of stunt a prince pulls, and now she has to call him king. He asked her to call him Hiro. That's the name he insists she use. Hibana agreed, her answer sharp and unwavering. A cold spike of dread struck her. Since she returned, she'd never once seen the king. Hiro said that his father is gravely ill now, trapped in a coma that's dragged on for several years now. Takumu was only meant to serve temporarily, but when his elder brothers renounced the throne, the crown landed on him. He's the acting king now. With the father poised to awaken, no one dares anoint a monarch on a whim, and the regency leaves the kingdom teetering. Understanding struck Hibana. She smiled and wished him luck, and Hiro barked at him to stop talking like she was a stranger. If he's swamped, she'll be swamped too. Whatever happens next could drive them to unleash an assassin. She agreed and vowed to train harder and grow stronger. A sparring partner left her baffled, and training alone would make it impossible for her to ever jump above her own head. She leaned in, eyes blazing, and demanded, "Do you know anyone strong?" Hiro urged her to ask Takuma about it. He's hunting for a sparring partner right now. Hibana suddenly demanded whether Hiro would win using alchemy, and he snapped that even a masterfully crafted, magically transformed weapon would be shattered by his brother. He's an anomaly, raw, wrecking strength paired with razor-sharp skill in every move. Auntie sneered that she was a dim shadow beside him. He handled it with blunt, ruthless simplicity. Takumu is a military genius, a tactical mastermind whose deadliest edge is his raw personal combat power. In a skirmish with a neighboring country, he was stunned to find a brutal five-fold gap in strength. She insists she's not fit to hold a candle to him, yet she can't help but goad him into an even fiercer challenge. She really has changed, transformed right before my eyes. Hibana's eyes flashed as she fired one last question. "Who baked that bread?" She was fascinated by the wheat, but knew turning that grain into melt-in-your-mouth bread demanded real skill. Hiro smirked, named it his secret employee, and promised he'd introduce her to it later. She froze, stunned that the secret agent was a woman, and the hero snapped, "There's nothing between us." Out of nowhere, Takumu closed the gap to Hiro and cut through the silence with his words. He snapped at them. "Have you lost your way?" The compass needle snaps true. They're dead on course. For a split second, Hibana swore it was a bear. The soldiers pressed onward, boots biting dust as they disappeared into the distance. Hiro figured today would be a quick trip to the sea. They'd arrive, scan the shoreline, and vanish. Takuma ordered them to camp on the shore. Making salt would demand brute strength and grueling hours. It wasn't just the nights he prowled the streets, rounding up recruits for the escort. Turns out keeping about 50 idle knights on hand was a masterstroke for the kingdom. The remaining knights are bogged down in the royal fields with no time to train. Don't squander specialized troops on mine salt. Build a base and escort the real miners out to the sea. Takumu dared to ask, "Can I carve a road with nothing but my own strength?" Trees crowd every path and tall grass tangles your feet while blind spots lurk at every turn. Stay razor sharp and ready to fight. Not a soul knows how many years it'll take to carve a road through the Devil's Forest. That road does more than haul salt. It's the lifeline that keeps their whole world moving. People will clamor for good food. And before long, we'll have to build a bustling fishing port to bring in the catch. This road is a lifeline. Wide enough for giant carts lugging ship cargo. It must be fortified and made safe. To carve a roughly 20-kilometer road, they must slay monsters, fell towering trees, and clear and level the land for the path. Hiro tried to gauge how much strength he'd need to keep working without collapsing. The task stretched on forever, and every moment crackled with danger. In an instant, he admitted they were wrong. Why drag them through the Devil's Forest when all they wanted was a safer road to the sea? Kumu thought, "He's rambling strange stuff again." But Hibana barely blinked. She was already used to it. Hiro swore he'd make his move before winter's first frost. Only 3 months left on the clock, and he swore he'd move heaven and earth to get it done. A cold knot tightened in Hibana's gut. She just knew he was plotting something. Anticipation crackled in his veins. He couldn't wait. At last the soldiers burst onto the shore, the sea roaring before them. The crowd erupted with electric joy. The sea was actually here. The sun was already bleeding into the horizon as they'd been forced to inch here, shoved and stalled by a river of bodies. Relief hit them like a thunderclap. They wouldn't have to spend the night in the Devil's Forest. The soldiers exploded into shouts, roaring that they were seeing the sea for the first time and that salt hung heavy in the air. The best soldiers carry the raw, unfiltered spirit of little children. The moment they pitch camp, freedom will sweep through them all. The soldiers bantered, their hunger stealing the show as every eye tracked the glinting fish in the sea. Finally, they sprang to work, pitching camp. They snap everything into place at breakneck speed. It was all because the sea set them ablaze with excitement. Takumu beckoned Hiro and Hibana to join him for a fishing trip. "I can't stomach canned food, but they've got the sea on their doorstep and you can feast on fresh, irresistible seafood." The three of them were already perched on the cliff, fishing rods clenched and eyes glued to the restless sea. Hiro's fishing rod tore taut as he ripped a thrashing fish from the water. The place lay empty. The fish swam recklessly, practically leaping into our nets. She snapped, "Is this fish edible?" Hiro said that unless the poison is ripped away, it can't be done. Takumu smirked. He'd gladly sink his teeth into that fish if its poison was very weak. They tossed out plain bait, and the fish slammed into it. Takumu spun to face the hero. He stripped off his crown and handed the kingdom to him. "Not all his subordinates have fallen in line yet." Takumu was right. His strength stunned everyone, and none of them ever imagined they'd have to kneel before their hero. He clenched his fists, every escape sealed, powerless to change a thing. "Words won't reach soldiers. You have to unleash force to make them listen." Hiro demanded, "What must I do while I can't challenge Takuma to a duel?" Out of nowhere, Takumu burst out, "That's a pretty good idea!" At this rate, he'd never behold a prosperous kingdom, and Takuma stood unbeatable. If they try to collude, they'll be unmasked in an instant. He's already trained them to give themselves away. He hurled a daring proposal. Let his personal knights clash in royal duels. That means he can take Takuma down. A single loyal knight at your side lets you wield a king's power. Hibana instantly owned up to being weaker than Takumu. He agreed without hesitation and vowed to train her. He steeled himself. He'd do it no matter what. They need a hero forged to withstand every blow, weather every nightmare, and still keep fighting. His personal light can't flicker. Hibana must train with Takumo and blaze past him. He hurled the question at her. "Do you regret it?" She refused, snapping that she had no right to rue the yawning gulf in strength between them. She glows with happiness. She's charging forward and will only get stronger. The answer crackled with promise, but it needed time to forge into true power, and Takumu couldn't wait. The duel's 1 week away. If she falters, Hiro will storm in armed with a weapon forged by alchemy. Those two will crush him, and he'll be hailed as a mighty king. Hiro beamed and grabbed the offer with a grin, while Hibana nodded, unfazed. With the outcome sealed, he roars one final challenge to test the hero. He swore he'd turn the kingdom into an alchemical fortress. If he couldn't prove to him that this girl could topple him, he wouldn't trust his alchemy. He barked, "Remember this! Burn it into your mind!" He nailed every word. Hiro swore he'd handle everything himself and show him. A soldier burst in and announced the tents were finally pitched. They could start cooking dinner. Toppling Takuma felt like pulling a miracle out of thin air. He'd bark 3 minutes. A grim vow to stall his brother. A blunt admission they had no chance of winning and could only steal time. She will train with her brother, but a week can't bridge the gulf between their strengths. Hibana dropped a bomb. He confessed he's kind of depressed. Isn't that wild? For an alchemist like him, every scrap of the world crackled with possibility. He burned to eclipse his brother, hunting for a weapon he could forge to erase that brutal gap. Rage boiled in his veins. Night fell like a curtain and the soldiers hunkered around the fire, grilling fish over crackling flames. They had one job: follow the plan. At dawn they'd sweep the beach clean and start carving a salt field. Hiro scrawled step-by-step instructions for the tool and snapped for them to follow every word. Tomorrow he and his brother Takumu would be gone, leaving them on their own. A gap yawned between him and his brother's soldiers. Hibana leaned in, smirk flashing, and challenged. "You using the pool or what?" He snapped that salt had to be mined without magic, so people who couldn't wield spells could dig it out with their own hands. They tumbled back to square one, only to find a mountain of new work heaped on them. But the hero still insisted it had to be done. Her brother spat that if she lost, he'd never again claim alchemy could save the kingdom. If their strength rivals the other nations, they can do anything. In the beginning, weapons were forged for the weak. The ideal weapon is one anyone can wield to kill anyone. It was once believed that a rich country would be targeted, so nations stockpiled devastating weapons. First, strip the enemy of their strength. Then Takumu, with his incredible strength and knights, smashes in the final blow. That's his main tactic. Hibana's grateful she forged a devastating weapon, but a blaze in her veins drives her to defeat him with her own strength. Hiro pushed her to outshine her brother. Not every clash has to be a duel. After it, she'll throw herself into days of grueling training and might even blaze past him. She swore to him that no matter how long it took, she'd claw her way up and become the strongest. If it can't prove itself, it won't earn the right to be called worthy. She burns to prove she's worthy of the hero's mantle. They locked eyes and stared, the seconds burning between them. Yuno spun away with a smirk and said it was a good thing she had that kind of confidence. Tension crackled in the air as Hibana leaned in and asked, "What did you come up with?" "You vowed to carve a road from the sea to the kingdom. But with only 3 months on the clock, Hibana flat out declared it impossible." Hiro's certainty burned bright. He only promised what he could deliver. She had to hatch a solid plan. She could carve out time for that later. But first she had to forge the weapon this week. Not quite. Tomorrow morning he finishes the road plan, then dives straight into building it, and as the road rises, he schemes over its weapons. Morning, he gears up for work. Afternoon, he paves a road while scheming new weapons. Evening, he forges a prototype and drills Hibana through relentless training. That's classic him, his edge. He hatches a plan in his head, jots it down, and sharpens every detail until it's airtight. Tomorrow they'd return to the castle and be thrown straight into work, so he turned to Hibana and begged for her help. They burst out of his devil's forest again, and he spins to her, slamming his plan down with a grin, sure it'll be brutal, perfect training. He blindsides her every single time. They clenched their fists and vowed to give it everything they had. By noon the next day, they stood at the ominous threshold of the devil's forest. They burst into their destination, breathless and triumphant. A mountain of paperwork slammed into agate, and now they break ground to build the road. Hibana leaned into the shadowy tree line and beckoned them, asking if they'd step inside now that they stood at the forest's entrance. Axes bit uselessly at the devil's forest. If they couldn't hack a path through, they'd be forced to barrel straight through here. He slammed his palm into the earth. If the blast wouldn't cut through the forest, it didn't have to. He'd shove its power straight into the ground. What he's about to build defies the word road. It's a non-road. He hammered and dug, forging a tunnel deep beneath the earth. It made building a road look tame. It wasn't true. The hero beckoned her over. Alchemy bends matter to a master's will. Sand and earth answer best. The harder he digs, the deeper the pit yawns. So he carves at an angle for the cart to glide. And when they hit the right depth, he shifts to digging sideways, cutting a path straight to the sea. By tunneling through, they can shrug off trees and monsters, and on yesterday's hike he discovered there's no underground water here. He couldn't tell if monsters crouched beneath his feet. He'd only start worrying the moment they crawled up. Disbelief slammed into Hibana. She couldn't accept that he was gouging tunnels with alchemy, even as the earth yawned open before her eyes. He begged her to trust him, then went and did it anyway. And this time he's going to do even more. Hibana trembled at the thought of the ceiling collapsing, and Hiro barked that smashing the wall would be futile. Alchemy had compressed the earth into stone-hard, unyielding mass. Brick doesn't stand a chance. It's rock solid and utterly waterproof, so it won't collapse. Once this road is built, people will stride safely from the city to the sea, harvesting salt and hauling in fish. Ruthless overfishing gutted the lake near the kingdom, leaving fishing nearly impossible. But if you cast your nets into the sea, the bounty will grow richer and the people will be happier. Hibana locked onto his beaming face, excitement sparking in her veins. She could hardly wait for this day. She watched her magical power bleed away and knew she'd have fainted long ago. The hero reminded her he was born this way, but she has to see it robs him just as fiercely. 2 horse carts had to pass through freely, so the tunnel's bare minimum was 8 meters wide and 3.5 meters high. It demanded a torrent of magic, and Hibana stepped forward, eyes blazing, asking what she could do to help him. Vinhero urged her to haul away the dirt and rocks. The earth can only be squeezed so far. We must stop leftover soil and rock from piling up. Strength work fit her like a glove, just the right challenge to fire her up. To avoid being dead tired before the evening workout, Hero snapped, "Pace yourself. Work smart. Don't push until you collapse." She snapped no, and vowed she'd push herself to the limit, pouring every ounce of effort into the work. She hungers for strength and plunges into another grueling workout. He swallowed his doubts, warned her to be careful, and steeled himself to care for her if she suddenly fell ill. Then they dove headfirst into crafting the song. Everything depended on his strength, and a savage curiosity burned in him to see how long it would hold. As Hera carved the tunnel, Hibana shoveled the leftover earth and stone into a cart and hauled it away. Hours bled away, but they still pressed on. After a long stretch, exhaustion finally slammed into them. They slammed the day's work shut. Pushing on would drain them dry and leave them no strength for the evening's tasks. They'd already blasted through 600 meters of the 20-kilometer course, far more than he'd thought. Even Hibana, the blazing dynamo, finally collapsed, completely wiped out. Her help let him throw himself into carving the tunnel. So he thanked her with fierce, heartfelt gratitude. Her gaze snapped to something right here. After a day lugging dirt, your body screams. Every foot they dig adds another long haul to ditch the spoil. And she grinned, calling it a brutal, perfect workout for muscles and endurance. At their breakneck pace, they could wrap it up in about a month. They've got 3 months to finish, so they're way ahead. There I was, banking on 2 months. Digging one tunnel won't stop them. They'll claw deeper and keep going. She leaned in, eyes blazing, and asked, "What else do you want to do?" "First, sweep every inch of the wall and slam in reinforcements until it can't collapse. Once that's done, slam in a watertight device that won't let a single drop through. And if water pops up anyway, channel it out through a drain. This spot demands light too, and a device that blasted fresh air into the room. It'll demand more than 2 months. A mountain of work waits to be conquered." He vowed to build countless marvels. She dared to ask if it was all necessary, and the hero declared the road wasn't just for hauling salt. Its very existence would be useful and indispensable. Suddenly he clutched something else. He called out, "You look wiped. Training with your brother this evening really took it out of you, didn't it?" She snapped upright, insisting she wasn't tired and still had plenty of strength, but her whole body shook. Unmistakable proof she wasn't okay. Hero snapped, "Open your mouth," then plucked a tiny pill between his fingers. He pressed it to Hibana's lips and snapped, "Don't spit it out." "He hurled it straight into our mouth!" The pill's taste slammed into Hibana and nausea flooded him instantly. In a heartbeat, she collapsed to the ground, sprawled and utterly motionless as if dead. She snapped, "What are you doing?" It tasted the worst in the world. She implored him not to laugh about it. The hero's voice cracked as he swallowed his pride and apologized. Then he leaned in and pressed, "How are you feeling? Are you any better?" Then she hurled herself into a desperate jump, straining to move. Her body went feather light, and she gasped, "Are there really pills that can banish fatigue?" They were forged by Alchemy, packed with priceless ingredients. Pop too many and your body will buckle under the strain. He bans reckless use. War could break out, and he won't let the supply go to waste. The medicine can catapult soldiers back into fighting shape in no time. Their salvation. Today's a special case. If he can't tell her apart from her brother, he won't be able to forge a normal weapon, and if he's tired, he won't be able to train. Guilt gnawed at him. She'd already decided to push herself until she collapsed and gulped down that medicine to recover fast and race back to training. She thanked him, her voice blazing with gratitude for that priceless medicine. A razor-sharp decision hit him. He turned back. Just as she turned to leave, Hibana stopped cold. One last question for him burned on her tongue. She slid him a single, small request. She leaned in, heart pounding, and asked, "Can I become your lover?" She held her breath, eyes locked on him, waiting for his answer to her request. Hero snapped, "What are you talking about?" Without a second's hesitation, she blurted, "I'm in love with you." She steeled herself and resolved to lay her heart bare to him. She can't be his queen, but he can bury their relationship in the shadows, and she wouldn't mouth those words just to flatter a man. He demanded, "Are you telling the truth?" Back at that meeting, when he squared up and took on 2 brothers, Hibana fell hard for him. That's why she reveals this to him. She hurled the question at him. "What are you going to say to this?" He leaned in and fired the question. Have you ever dated anyone, Hibana? She hadn't met them, but she believed they'd handle it. People are animals too, so trust your gut. They locked eyes and held them, the world narrowing until only their stare remained. The hero spun on his heel and pleaded for time to think it over. She swore she'd wait. Patience is a swordsman's sharpest advantage. She yanked the cart free and stormed off. Hero's mind slammed into one question. Why had she confessed so suddenly? Royal marriages are power plays that weld nations together. But their kingdom is so destitute no noble will touch it. So they just dodge all the messy alliance drama. Hibana radiates strength, beauty, and sharp intelligence. Every time she appears, conversation ignites. They've got to tear off the polite masks and finally learn who the other really is. Soldiers hammered through drills in the yard. Hibana and Hero burst toward them, beaming as they called out a bright greeting to everyone. Their faces were twisted into strange masks, yet not a soul hated them. Maybe word of their clash reached them. They're burning to see Hibana's strength. They reached Takum. He burned to see Hibana's strength and was determined to force her into a showdown with Harold. She cocked her head and fixed her gaze on Harold. He begged her, voice trembling, not to fight him. Takumu snarled that fighting him while his powers raged unchecked was suicide. He could kill someone by accident. Hibana's eyes ignited. She resolved to unleash her power and show him exactly what she could do. Hero gripped her shoulder, locked eyes with her, and bellowed, "Good luck in the fight!" Harold challenged Takumu. "Can you really let loose?" He confirmed it. He'd already sized up, roughly, what she was capable of. Every trace of interest in her evaporated from him. Hibana and Harold already poised in the arena. Hero stared them down, then demanded answers from everyone else. Hibana leaned in, eyes blazing, and snapped, "What are the rules?" Harold urged her to take up wooden swords and declared they'd duel until the first blow landed. She steeled herself and sealed her acceptance of the conditions. Hero beheld raw, crushing strength in a Harold. He was certain he ranked in the squad's top 12. If magic wrapped him like a second skin, his physical power could surge. Takumu's command snapped through the ranks. "Prepare for battle!" The instant the clash erupted, both of them barreled forward. Hibana lashed out with her sword. Harold slammed his steel against hers and blocked the strike. She erupted into a furious assault, raining blow after blow down on him. She shot forward, every step a blur. Hibana whirled in a tight circle, squeezing the Herald in a vice-like grip. A flicker of tension shot through him as her pressure bore down. Spectators roared at her razor-sharp footwork and lightning speed, while Harold could only scramble to defend himself. She whips around Harold, plants her feet in a perfect striking stance, and springs forward to strike. A single nuance stood alone. Harold stands unbroken, parrying every assault. Strike with a savage blow that lets you seize her. Harold exploded into action at the exact heartbeat, his timing flawless. Out of nowhere, he launched her sword skyward. Hibana defied him, dancing through his assault and parrying blow after blow. Harold matches Hibana's lightning speed, while her relentless tactics slowly grind his stamina down. Without warning, Harold exploded forward, his fists already raining down on her. His strike whiffed. Hibana blinked out of sight. She burst into view above him and swooped to hover right behind his back. He crashed to the ground, and Harold's eyes went wide with confusion, and Hibana's strike slammed into them dead on. Harold crashed to the ground. He bowed to her triumph and declared it a formidable victory. They traded thanks for the fight. Then Kumu will stride forward and address them, his voice striking like a thunderclap that demands their full attention. He roared his approval at their fierce fight. Watching her, he saw Hibana's strength blaze in a fierce, unmistakable way all her own. She demanded to know what it meant. He dropped to one knee and begged for her sword. He snatched her blade into his grip and began to unsheath his own sword. He thrust it into Hero's hands and urged him to hold it tight, right in front of him. He snatched it, clutched it, and asked, "What's it for?" Takumu's warning cut through the silence. He was coming. I's legs snapped taut as he readied himself to launch forward. He swung once and cleaved his own sword like it was butter. His heart plummeted, literally crashing down into his feet. Takumu raved the sword was incredible. His own blade had been just as strong. Now it's nothing but trash. Hibana snapped. Why did he do that? While Takumu methodically readied their weapons for the fight. If Hibana had fallen in that fight, if they'd dueled with wooden swords, or if they'd gone at one another with real weapons, this would have happened. She snapped, "How much longer will you keep underestimating me? Do you really think you can win by taking my blow?" He roared he'd win. He wouldn't have dared say it unless victory was already in his grasp. Hibana snapped at him. "I don't need your favors." Takumu snarled. "Prove it, win this, and if you do, the next fight will be merciless." But only if she can pull it off. She wrenched the sword free from Takumu's hands. The hero leans in, voice razor sharp. "You sure you can handle this?" Confidence crackled through her. Victory felt inevitable. She came to size up their strength. Now she's hell-bent on seizing the victory. Word had it she was seething. Brother baited Kibata with a smug grin, utterly blind to how badly he'd underestimated him. Takumu and Hibana squared off in the arena, the air between them crackling with raw, dangerous tension. They roared that their battle had begun, and came away empty-handed and bone dry. It happened in a heartbeat. Gone before you could blink. Hiro was dead wrong. He thought Takumu's brother would go first and Hibana would only defend. But Hibana blew that expectation apart and did something completely different. He held his stance and let Hibana unleash the first strike. Then he juked out of the way, the attack cutting nothing but air, and end the fight with one bone-crushing, earth-shattering strike. A swordsman's foundation? Hold the perfect distance and read your opponent's pace like a heartbeat. The victory wasn't born from speed or strength. It was carved by razor-sharp skill. From the start, the brother had no plan. He was steamrolled by an overwhelming tide of raw strength. Takumu declared she's in peak physical condition. She throws in just enough effort and coasts on raw talent. He seethed at her complacency. Consumed by himself, he can't even see the enemy closing in. When people miss what's staring them in the face, misread every clue, and can't foresee the next move, the truly strong become impossible to beat. He finished, then barked an order that sent the soldiers back to their posts. They broke ranks as Takumu closed in on the hero. He hailed Hibana as a lethal swordswoman. But that's the problem. She only splits everyone into winners and losers. He scoffs that she treated losing to him like it was meant to be, felt no sting of regret, and never once wanted him. Selfishness consumed her, and she lost, her fatal flaw. Hibana's never found a peer who could truly test her, and the Golden Knights sit far beyond reach. She can't lock eyes on an opponent and strike in a flash. She has to taste the bitter sting of defeat to learn how. Victory's certain. From the other side, I get the perfect vantage to read the enemy's every move. He wasn't just a powerhouse. He pulled others onto the right path, and luckily they were on the same side. The hero thanked him with fire in her eyes and vowed she'd come back stronger than ever. Takumu, too, stepped forward and implored Hiro for a favor. He implored him to forge him a sword. If you can, melt his shattered sword down and forge it into raw material. The hero's alchemical sword cleaved it clean. This strike was the pivotal step in Takumu's ritual. Even after he'd used it like that, it didn't change a thing. He burned to fight with it again if he could. The ritual stripped his doubts bare, forcing him to embrace alchemy and finally move on. The hero agreed. Grateful for Hibana's training, he swore he'd forge him a blade worthy of a warrior. Normal metals blank passed Rek's enchantment compatibility, but Takumi's brother carved battle into that blade. Its combat history guarantees the enchantment will take. He pleaded with him not to unleash the new sword on Hibana. Takumu had engineered this exact trial to watch if any of them could actually surpass him. He planted his hands on the hero, then strode off. Hibana sat motionless in the arena. The hero slid up behind her, closing the gap in a heartbeat. Hibana vanished. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at him. A crushing defeat swallowed her whole. She'd lost before, but nothing had ever crushed her like this. Hiro implored her to cast off this resentment. She'll explode into strength and leave her clumsiness in the dust. The hero's belief in her burned brighter than doubt. Then he urged her to go home during the fight. He saw exactly what she needed and vowed he'd help her win. Hibana shot him a fierce nod. She was with him. They all showed up at his workplace together. The gulf between her and Takumu yawned open again. No matter how hard she trained, she couldn't catch him in a week. And now she had to summon the strength of a hero. Every now, she says, locks her gaze on the future. Proof she's already moving forward. She rebuffed his consolation with a cold, cutting stare, so he stepped back and left her alone. The two of them will bring Takuma's brother to his knees. Hibana wasn't built to win today. Simply uncovering what set them apart yielded enough results. He's right, and he's miles farther away than she ever imagined. Pinned in that hopeless position, her arms and legs frozen and useless, the fierce confidence she'd carried shattered. He demanded to know why she was so timid, and she snapped that she wouldn't be like this anymore. She called him bad. He answers with nothing but venomous insults. Hibana will close the distance and catch him, but toppling him in just a week? Not a chance. He hammered out sword after sword for her, but she couldn't even stand up to him. Her mind raced for a plan. Hiro's voice cut through the chaos. Only one thing remained for them to do. Pour every upgrade into armor, accessories, and tools. Leave the sword sacred and untouched. She demanded, voice razored. What does it mean? Her sword's lightness, sharpness, durability, and destructive power all sit around a 4. Built on featherlight balance and a razor edge. It can't be made any lighter, but that edge bites with all the power it needs. Her fighting style already boasts ironclad durability and earth-shattering destructive power, so sharpening any of it would be wasted. He forges armor that sharpens his reflexes to lightning speed and unlocks razor-keen dynamic vision. The armor floods you with lightning reflexes and razor-sharp dynamic vision, but the body's crushing load restricts it to just 3 minutes. This is more than enough to demolish every swordsman who dares to fight. She leaned in, eyes blazing, and demanded, "How would you forge armor like that?" The hero lunged and snatched the responder doll, clutching it like a lifeline. He vowed he'd harness raw electrical energy. A bolt of surprise jolted Hibana when she heard about electricity. Her voice cut through the air. "What is it?" Doubt slammed into Hiro. Could he explain it at all? "I decided the fastest move was to show her up close, so I just did it on her." She demanded, "Is this indecent?" The hero snapped back, "Never." His mind kicked into overdrive as he hunted for what he should do next. He snapped into action and did something. Hibana shuddered, convinced it was indecent. She urged him to shake off his shyness. He can do whatever he wants. Determined to show her, he seized her hand and shook it with fierce resolve. A jolt of electricity ripped through her. She yelped, a high, shocked squeal tearing from her throat. He burst into raucous laughter. She shot him a sharp look and demanded, "Why are you laughing?" He burst into laughter when her reaction hit him with an unexpected, disarming sweetness. The hero roared it was electricity. Nerves laced the human body and electric currents surged through them. Electric currents surge through nerves, firing muscles into action. When you deliberately channel electricity through her, her muscles seize and spasm against her will. Watch. Her hand shot up all by itself. Hibane's eyes narrowed as his hands moved on their own, and he snapped, "Do you really want to use that tool?" He'll hijack the brain's electricity to sharpen dynamic vision and rocket signals to the muscles, slashing reaction times, the exact effect he's engineering into the armor. Hibana nodded sharply. She agreed. Tomorrow she's going to unleash electricity in training, master the armor, and dissect Prince Tukumu's every move until they're burned into her memory. Her excitement surges again, but the creation will take about 2 days, so she'll have to wait. She consented to this. She shot back, demanding to know why it had anything to do with obscenity. The memory seared into her. She refused to let it go. Nerves don't all fire the same. Each person's system sparks at a different threshold, so you have to pinpoint the exact jolt of electricity they need. The current must slam straight into the skin. If anything blocks or interferes, the readings collapse and they can't pull accurate data. Comprehension hit Hibana like lightning, and she asked if she could start receiving data after she'd eaten and bathed. In that instant, curiosity burned through me. I had to uncover why this happened. She insisted she had to prepare, determined to be breathtaking before she met her beloved. After devouring his meal, he waved it off, insisting he was fine because he wanted to meet someone. He vowed to meet the baker who crafts mouth-watering loaves, so he invited her to come with him. She burned to meet the person Hiro liked. He snapped at her, demanding to know how she'd figured out he liked this man. She shot back that she understood from his voice. When he talks about it, his whole face lights up with joy. She still couldn't make sense of it, but she hung on every word, razor-focused. The hero confessed it. You could even call it love. She's the linchpin holding the kingdom's last chance at salvation together. Hiro paced the hall, every nerve on edge, eyes locked on the doorway for Hibana. She barreled in, cheeks flushed, and blurted, "Sorry I'm late!" Seconds slipping away, she yanked on casual clothes and bolted. Hiro snapped, "What's wrong?" It wore her face and hit its mark. Then he demanded, "What's that smell?" Hibana snatched the Principality of Kinar perfume, the day's special beast, and anointed herself with it. He shot back, "We're really just going to eat dinner and collect data?" Hibana shook her head, fearing Hira might fail her today. He snapped and refused on the spot. She spat "coward" at him like a dagger. As they strode down the corridor, she blurted, "The royal family lives on this floor. We're about to meet one of them." Shock ripped through her as she blurted, "Is she really his bride?" He barked, "What are you doing?" and snapped, "Go into that room." Then he flung the door wide open. They stormed into a room that could have been a library, walls swallowed by towering, book-packed shelves. Feast your eyes on the royal room. That used to be her father's office. She reclaimed it and fashioned it into her own room. Someone sat on the stairs and she snapped the book shut. She tore through them, grading each one with fierce, relentless focus. A tiny girl darted up to them. She blurted the question, "Hibana is a knight." Hibana's eyes snapped to her, and she thought she was utterly adorable. Hiro burst forward and introduced Hibana to her. The girl locked eyes with Hibana and held that stare for a long, taut moment. Delight exploded from her, lighting up her face. Then she grabbed her own hands and blurted that her brother had told her so much about herself. Truth slams into the room. She's the hero's little sister. "Behold the kingdom of Carterosa's second princess, Nayuki Carterosa." She demanded to know why he hadn't introduced them before. She knew the woman rarely showed herself in public, yet now she was meeting her for the first time. It all blew up because of Miley's sister. They deliberately keep Nayuki hidden from everyone, so he apologized. Hibana's jaw dropped as the truth slammed home. He was right. She sank into a crisp bow before Nayuki, smiling as she said, "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Hibana Clairford, Prince Hiro's knight." She lit up the moment as she met him and blurted, "Are you my brother's friend?" The bonnet snapped. "Do you know they're friends?" Hiro explained she scarcely ever left the house, her body too frail. So he became her eyes, painting the outside world for her. Whenever he came for a book, he spun vivid tales about Hibana. Weakness clung to her, yet she'd always burned with a fierce envy for strong women, Nayuki admitted. That's why admiration for her burned in me. Jealousy ripped through Hibana because he had a sister like that. She's unbearably cute. I ached to pull her into a tight hug. A sharp voice cut through the air, telling her to stop. Hibana's heart lurched. She knew that voice, and her head snapped up. They waited, silent and electric, like a storm about to break. Night closed in around Rebecca, the friend of Nayuki, Hiro, and Hibana. Nayuki flashed a confident smile and declared, "With me here, everything's fine." Rebecca snapped, "Only I can hug her." Hiro swept up to Rebecca, greeted her with a fierce smile, and thundered thank you for her help. Rebecca obeyed Princess Nayuki's command, but the shame of being forced into servant's clothes scorched into her memory. When the truth slammed into Hibana, she realized she'd been the one who brought them food back then, even though they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Rebecca snapped, "So because I didn't know I'm a bad student?" When panic seized Hibana, she blurted out that she was only joking. She strode forward and bowed, newly sworn into service as Prince Hiro's knight. And she revealed the hero flat out refused every other night. He waited, bound to that spot by the promise they'd sworn. She exploded with joy and thanked me, her smile practically lighting up the room. Hiro scoffed, waved it off, and declared it nothing special. Rebecca misses out on Master Heath's training. She then branded him good, air quotes slicing the word into pure sarcasm. She snapped, "He got stronger?" Hibana had always pictured Rebecca at the head of an army, so seeing her serve someone else hit like a gut punch. If she chose a mistress, it had to be Princess Nayuki. She's a force of nature. Rebecca swallowed a grin and snickered under her breath. She proclaimed Princess Nayuki is her everything, the kingdom's greatest treasure. She will throw herself between her and danger, ready to die to keep her safe. Hibana's voice snapped. "Has she always been like this?" Hiro snapped. "We're nothing like Nayuki, she only idolizes me." He strode up to Tribeca and declared her love for Nayuki was plain as day, so he'd tell Hibana the whole truth himself. He dropped the bomb. The two of them were secret allies. Nayuki fired up the oven and baked a steaming golden loaf to win her brothers over. Rebecca, disguised as a servant, slipped it into their hands. Determined to keep them hidden, he pulls them close and pleads for their help. He made his decision in a heartbeat and sprinted back to the very thing they'd called him here for. It was ready. Nayuki urged Rebecca to fetch it. She burst in, clutching a rag that hid something inside. There it was, the paste Hiro had asked them to craft. Hiro snatched it up and snapped it clean in two. He roared, "It was well done!" When Hibana asked what it was, the hero shot back with a grin and declared it a type of noodle. Rock-hard and unappealing, it was nothing but dried-out canned rations that demanded cooking before anyone could eat them. Plain food? Think again. Plunge that pasta into roaring hot water and it erupts into pure deliciousness. They needed wheat. The sea salt their brother gave them. Water and eggs into dough. Shoved it through a pasta machine their brother forged with alchemy. Then spread the paste to sun-dry until the surface hardened and held its shape. A stint of indoor drying returned moisture to stop cracking, and sun and wind finished the job, drying it completely. When the harvest overflows, churn out a batch of paste and stash it. It stays good for 3 years as a lifeline if the next season fails. Hibana had conquered every noodle the Culinary threw at her, but she'd never faced one this unyielding. All Rebecca had ever seen in a can was hard, dried bread. Canned noodles? That idea had never crossed her mind. Hiro shot a question at Nayuki. She beckoned him over to eat, and she'd set out far more than simple dried rations. She hustled them into their seats at the table. She'd cooked up a massive spread. They all slid into their seats around the table in unison. Hibana reached out, asking if they needed help, but they waved her off, insisting they were her guests. After every last prep, Nayuki beamed and shouted, "Enjoy my noodles!" Steam curled from the noodles like a siren's call, utterly irresistible. Rebecca smirked and dared them. Try the pasta Princess Nayuki toiled over. She poured her heart into it. Hiro's jaw clenched as he snatched the salt and scattered a decisive pinch into the mix. He whipped the paste into a tight spiral around his fork. He shoved it into his mouth and began to chew. Every bite burst with flavor, utterly eclipsing his. It was miles tastier. This pasta screams weirdness. Mayuki's food was simple and comforting, but the moment the hero tried to cook it, he turned it into an awful mess. He never imagined a single pinch of salt could boost the flavor that much. Nayuki swore she'd practiced relentlessly, and the hero knew their subjects would like her food. After so many attempts, the dish finally burst into mouth-watering perfection. Nayuki thrust a fork at Hiro, urging him to taste the pasta and sauce first. then unleashed a torrent of insane compliments. I seized the ladle and poured a silky ribbon of white sauce first. Hiro tested it and recognition slammed into him. He knew instantly what it was. It revealed itself as potato sauce. They grabbed mushroom soup, swirled in a silky puree, and sealed it with a pinch of salt. Memories from another world pulsed through him, so a sauce made from onion soup puree barely made him flinch. Nayuki is different. She conjured that sauce. In a world where food is only cooked, she's undeniably a culinary genius. Hibana couldn't wait. She snatched another sauce and dove right in. A sharp, sour shock slammed into his tongue. Vinegar is the beating heart of this sauce. Hibana gaped. Their kingdom actually had vinegar, and she grinned, convinced the paste and sour sauce were a perfect pairing. Midway through cooking, they accidentally brewed vinegar. Vinegar sat ready, and she seized the moment, mixing vinegar, oil, salt, and dried meat into a fierce, tangy sauce. She shoved the meat into the steaming soup, flashed a grin, and asked, "So, how do you like it?" Hibana beamed and proclaimed it perfect. Both options tasted outrageously delicious. Their flavors hit like a tidal wave of decadence. Deep, layered, and unforgettable. She nailed it, and I begged her to lend me her recipes. Nayuki lit up, gladly agreed, and set out to share the recipes with everyone. Rebecca launched herself at Nayuki, smothering her with jubilant congratulations. They'll thrust wheat into the people's hands and unveil simple pasta recipes dripping with mouth-watering sauces. Nayuki's help is a lifeline. We'll be calling on it again when the time comes. A jolt hit him. She'd said how she'd accidentally brewed vinegar, and he fired the question at her. "Did you manage to make what you were trying to?" She shot back that everything had fallen into place. "Not finished. It's already bursting with irresistible flavor." Hibana demanded, "What exactly happened?" Hiro finally asked Nayuki for something he'd chased for years. A token set to become the symbol of their developing country. Rebecca dove in too, awe slammed into her. She'd never imagined anything like this could happen in their country. Their non-stop chatter set Hibana on fire. He had to try it. Nayuki snapped to Rebecca, "Bring out what you've prepared." Then she reappeared, a strange decanter gleaming in her hands. She tilted the bottle, sending the drink cascading into the wooden glasses. Everything hissed, spitting curtains of white foam. Hibana lunged in and inhaled sharply, snatching his scent like a hunter. It hit me like lightning. I knew exactly what it was. Hiro barked, "Try!" He knew she'd understand everything the instant she did. A jolt hit him. Hiro realized he hadn't had a drink in ages. He snatched the vial and downed this liquid in one trembling gulp. It delights the tongue and soothes the throat as bitterness melts away and sweetness bursts in, unleashed by a bold, punchy rush of wheat and hops. Flavor detonated in my mouth. Pure, irresistible deliciousness. Hibana froze as disbelief crashed over him like a tidal wave. Behold L, a top-tier force dripping with razor-sharp, unbeatable quality. He engineered a breakthrough wheat and burned with one unstoppable obsession, turning it into alcohol. It won't save the kingdom, but it'll flood the people's lives with richer, happier days. Its symbol will be the flavor industry's wares like a frothing ale. She'd already sampled ale in the Principality of Culinary, but nothing had ever slammed into her taste buds like this. Never anything so delicious. The hero learned from the respondent that the taste hinged on the wheat's quality and Nayuki's talent. This is the taste of happiness, crafted for those who crave a rich, overflowing life, not the quiet, simple kind. He whipped around to face Nayuki. He vowed that at the harvest festival he'd step before everyone and proclaim himself king. He craved this ale poured over him and asked her to arrange it all. Nayuki braced herself and vowed she'd somehow cope with this task. Rebecca swore she'd move heaven and earth to help her. "You can always rely on Nayuki. She's the little sister who never abandons you." The brothers sneer, writing Nayuki off as useless. "She's so trusting. Diplomacy would swallow her whole. Marriage for convenience is out of the question. And even if she's clever, politics isn't her battlefield. Magic crackles at her fingertips, but sunlight sears her fragile skin. Every ounce of exertion tears at her body, leaving her unable to fight, and her kindness keeps dragging her under. Nayuki wields the power to save their kingdom. She even baked the bread the brothers loved. Next time they'll spill every secret. They'll definitely change their minds about Nayuki." Brother Takumu and Hibana forged their skills through relentless training. But they must also lift their kingdom to prosperity, and when they join forces with Brother Agui to sow wheat across the realm, they'll need Nayuki's recipes. By doing all this, their kingdom will rocket forward. They dove headfirst into cleaning after the whole meal, wiping up every last trace of the chaos. Lunchtime hit, and the heroes thundered that it was time to start measuring. Hibana begged for one more hour. When he asked why, she admitted the food was too delicious to resist. She'd devoured so much her belly ballooned. Hiro shrugged it off like it meant nothing. She implored him to understand her. He agreed, and in an instant her training thundered to life. He blurted, "Are you sweating?" She loathed sweating, so she kept a towel draped like armor. Almost an hour has already flown by. Hibana began stripping, and when the last garment hit the floor, she declared she was ready. She rushed to the hero and, breathless with relief, thanked him for waiting. Naked and unflinching, she planted herself in front of him and snapped, "Can we start already?" Hero locked eyes with her and asked her to stay right there. He declared he'd try to tear through everything. Shame seared through her as she stood frozen like that. He lunged and touched her back. She squealed loudly. He leaned in and asked if everything was okay, and she shot back that his hands were cold. The hero barked that it wasn't anything else. The skin on her back was burning. At sea, the space yawned wide, far more open. An uncanny shiver crawled up his spine. She wears modesty like a cloak. He shook his head, the plan collapsing. This couldn't be done. It would be rude to Hibana. So he clenched his jaw, shoved the thought away, and forced himself to concentrate. He hurls another crackling jolt of electricity straight through her. She still flinched every time the electric jolt slammed into her. Hero pleaded, "Be patient, just a little while." It blew me away. She sculpted her body to flawless perfection. Talent crackled in her veins. Hibana's jaw dropped. The electric current alone had unlocked every secret. If they pull this off now, the gap with Takumu's brother will shrink to almost nothing. The rest of the work lands squarely on her. Bet on it. Within a week she'll explode into raw, undeniable strength. Even wielding his weapon, she can't match Takumu's monstrous power. Together, though, they can take it down. Hibana snarled that letting only her wield his weapons would be a waste. He swore that he and his brother Takumu would arm his army with them. Now he's about to unleash the exact same thing on men. He didn't just arm the masses, he hand-forged a unique personal weapon for every single person. Slip them a dud weapon, and their whole army will stand equal to the Golden Knights of the Duchy of Kanar. If they improve their weapons, perfecting them will become their obsession. If they don't crush this as effortlessly as Takuma's brother did without alchemy equipment, we're toast. Hero's line was badass, and it actually makes perfect sense. She swallowed her pride, apologized for complaining earlier, and vowed to tackle everything head-on, doing it the best way possible. That answer nailed it! She'd move mountains for Princess Nayuki's pasta. That heavenly bite surged through her like lightning. A single scrap remained, and he murmured, "Don't move." Minutes bled away until exhaustion slammed into him. She thanked him and asked if he was utterly exhausted, and he couldn't deny it. In a way, he was. That was it for today. She bolted for her room. He's determined to personally hammer the work into absolute perfection. She said that when he saw her naked, panic slammed into her and a strange, dizzy unease washed over her. She dropped the words like a bomb, spun on her heel and strode away. Hero's mind snapped to life as she plotted the exact command she'd bark at him. The next day, a tunnel at the edge of the Devil's Forest yawned open, swallowing the light. They tear into the earth again and again, digging deeper and deeper. But the tunnel stretches on with no end in sight. Hero barked, "This distance is still short, but it'll only get harsher ahead. Rig drainage and ventilation gear as we press on." He bellowed that they should eat lunch right now. The food practically begged to be devoured. For lunch, steaming pasta crafted by Nayuki slams onto the table. She warned you to season the sauce so it's perfect for street snacking. Compact, won't hog space. Then she wrapped the minced meat in the finished noodles, salted the mince with a pinch, and molded tiny cutlets. Princess Nayuki devours every new lesson like a treasure hunter racing for gold. Hibana bit into it, and pure bliss flooded her senses. The salty tang hits like a miracle, resurrecting a body drowned in fatigue. They only began carving the tunnel yesterday. Since dawn they've been ripping into the earth, digging this tunnel non-stop. Daytime duties take over. He's meeting Prince Agatha, and Hibana will train with Takumu. From today onward, training fell to only her and Prince Takumu, and she believed she had to show the soldiers the path to true strength. A sudden jolt of memory slammed into Hero. Today he'd be tied up, so he'd miss their training. He pushed her to spill every ache, burn, and rush she felt the moment the workout ended. He thrust a crisp, tailored suit into Hibana's hands. A new kind of armor. Reality snaps into focus. It's the same suit. He warned it would take at least 2 days. She swore she'd be used to him in a single day, and insisted on watching her brother's every movement with perfect clarity. She clamped her hands onto his cheeks. He leaned in and warned, "Stare hard and you'll spot the dark circles beneath his eyes." She barked, "You haven't slept?" Hero shot back, "I have, 5 minutes tops!" Hibana's heart surged with joy and relief. She couldn't believe he'd done all of it just for her. She snapped, "Are you really going to leave the tunnel at this stage? It'll collapse. Everything's in place. They can't abandon it like this. If they don't push hard today, they won't finish on time. Only magic can pull this off." Mana still trickles back at the same pace, so nothing's going to fall apart here for the next 2 days. Everything screams strength, but next to Hibana it crumbles like paper. The sooner he wraps it up, the sooner Hibana's power will surge. He survived a sleepless night, no harm done. She flashed a grateful smile, thanked him, and vowed to wear it with the utmost care. Hiro shoved aside her shyness and begged her to pour out her feelings. She's still green and full of weak spots, so he'll step up and shoulder the burden for now. She charges in to test the suit, pins down its weak points, he upgrades it, and she emerges far stronger, changing their life. If that's the case, she'll unleash hell and show no mercy. Hiro planted himself in the castle, sitting squarely across from Agatha. Relief crashed through the room when he arrived, and Agatha sprang forward, asking to show him the materials first. This year, they descend on the fields. So that their people can grow wheat, they must first unveil the result. This daring gamble puts them on the line, not the villagers. Right now, the fields stand divided. Privately owned on one side, publicly owned on the other. Night laborers wrestle the state fields into order. They aren't professionals, only get a couple hours of training, and spend the rest of their time hard at work in the fields or doing farm labor. Most soldiers are the spare sons, second or third born, plucked from quiet homes. Only on rare occasions do recruits hail from foreign lands. They pour their sweat into the kingdom's harvest, take a steady salary in return, and when age steals their strength, they lay down their tools and retire. His brother's bold development plan turned the fields into a bounty. Harvests overflow. He's still in the black after paying wages, and landless people can afford decent food and dare to dream of owning a field. My brother forged this system, and now both the people and the kingdom flourish. Our domestic policy is rock solid. They can scream that wheat will never grow in those fields, but without a single precedent, no one will be convinced. They've tried planting wheat time and again, and it never took. If he brings it up again, panic will spread and everyone will freeze, unable to act. First, you must slam down a clear, undeniable success. Just trying won't cut it. One bad harvest and instant widespread famine descends. If they tap the state fields and press night laborers into service, the whole story flips. Even if the plan somehow fails, they can still cover the night wages and won't starve. Hiro primed the salt ahead of time so it could be unleashed at the perfect moment. Agatha flat out refuses to believe wheat will grow, her mind already racing through alternative plans. He backs his skills with iron confidence. A little unusual, but his job is to be ready for anything. Since he raised no objections to the plan, Hiro seizes the moment and drives the discussion forward. Agatha wanted to say the same, but one glaring problem stopped her cold. The soldiers balked, voices rising as they flat out refused to back this. They stormed in, demanding the sweet potatoes be planted exactly as planned. They feared the regret of skipping the sweet potatoes. Agatha promised they'd be paid even if nothing grew, yet they ignored her. Tragic. They lock arms and scrape by in a hostile world. Their love for country and friends blazes like fire. Money never crosses their minds, even at the brink of failure. All that drives them is this: if they don't plant sweet potatoes, someone will starve. Their noble act swells you with pride, but it would break your heart to watch them confine themselves to only sweet potatoes this year. They'll seed the state field first. If it explodes into a fat harvest that feeds everyone and tucks away grain for the next year, they'll roll wheat cultivation out across the entire kingdom next season. If this year falls apart, they'll end up a whole year late. The single flaw: improved wheat dwarfs sweet potatoes in yield, churning out far more. Depending only on sweet potatoes right now is a recipe for disaster. Planting them on the same ground over and over will bleed the soil dry and crash your yields as the land turns infertile. Worse, if a blight strikes the sweet potatoes, it will unleash a nationwide famine. Nothing guarantees it won't happen, so the hero demands they secure at least 2 staple foods. Wheat stands as a pillar of the kingdom's salvation, and losing a whole year's harvest would gut the economy. They could have snapped their fingers and forced the knights to work, but that would have been wrong. This kingdom survives solely on the people's love. Shatter that foundation and a tidal wave of pent-up fury will crash down at once. Force them to plant wheat. If it thrives, you can win the people over. But it's a high-stakes gamble. The people here are the kingdom's only treasure. Clutch them close. They can never be lost. This wheat hits harvest in 3 months. It's cold hardy but won't survive a full winter. So plant it within 3 weeks or the window slams shut. He drives every citizen to work, convinced their sweat will fill the kingdom's coffers. All eyes snap to Brother Agatha. They shoved the task at him. Win them over with your own words. 5 years ago, the hero sprinted, sword drawn, and unleashed a savage scream at the tree. He slammed into the trunk and ricocheted backward, nothing more. The workers barreled to his side, begging him to rest. Simply swinging a sword over and over wouldn't make him stronger. Hero pictured himself waking in an open field scattered with seeds. Hunger clawed at his gut, and he had to hustle for cash. A hand thrust a steaming mound of boiled potatoes into his arms. The boy bounded over, asked if he was resting, then pressed a treat from his mother into his hand. He roared, rallied every other worker, and dared them to sprint again, because they were princes too. Hiro grabbed the treat, threw out a sharp "thanks," and the guy plunged right back into his work. Hiro and Agatha hovered high above the field, eyes slicing across every inch below. "Work wrapped up early today," Agatha snapped. "Why didn't you dig deeper into it?" He hung back, refusing to shatter their focus, and waited until they finished. Agatha could summon them to the castle. He flat out refused to set foot in the outpost. "Prove you're sincere," he demanded. Brother Agatha spun an electrifying tale and everyone hung on his every word. But something strange lurked beneath it. The strangest part, every argument Agatha made shattered against their stubborn resolve. She couldn't convince them. It slammed into him. He had to step up and try to win them over himself. He rang the bell, announced they were finished, and proclaimed they'd done a stellar job. Arrow swept in and greeted them. The guy had warned him not to come alone, and the hero's gut burned with the truth. He knew he shouldn't come alone. He was desperate to speak to the hero because rumors were spreading like wildfire. He begged him for more new tools. The days of scraping by were over, and they'd be grateful to him. Hero backed them. Those were far more practical than the old ones. Nearly every scrap of mind iron was siphoned into armor. With no mind to draw from, he had to clamp onto the hilt in his hand. Without it, he'd be forced to fight with only the blade's tip. His mind raced to the day they'd finally break ground and plant sweet potatoes. Convinced he didn't need adventure, the hero shrugged off quests and planted a sweeping sea of wheat. He thundered they'd grow wheat. "Every path's blocked. They have nowhere left to turn." The workers erupted into hushed, urgent whispers about it the instant it appeared. They froze. This was their hero prince? The image kept looping in their heads, refusing to let them forget. Hero 2 seized their attention and urged them to imagine planting green onions and wheat. He barked at them to cut the murmurs and actually inspect the wheat he'd brought. Give it that special fertilizer and it might finally push through the soil. Wheat's leagues more reliable than sweet potato, failure's nearly nil, and if the plan holds, we'll be harvesting by winter. The workers exchanged tense glances, minds racing as they thought it over. "She's tiny. There'll be nothing to eat. They'll swarm and feed like mosquitoes," the guy snarled. "Even here the prince lies, timeless, possibly eternal." "And if the plan unfolds," he asked, "do you know what happens when hunger comes?" Winter could arrive early, and if he quit his reckless stunts, they'd survive it peacefully this year. So he snapped, "Why are you doing these pointless things?" Simon isn't a bad guy. He refuses to accept that growing sweet potatoes is the only right way out, and he might be a fool, but unlike others, he can be convinced otherwise. He's one of the few he trusts. Speak to anyone else, and it could cost him dearly. A surge of clarity hit Hiro. He finally knew why he wanted to grow wheat. "This will ignite a surge of prosperity across the country." When they insisted the same idea still drove him, he snapped back that either way, sweet potatoes were off the table. "This wheat yields far more than sweet potatoes, but it's useless as it stands. Left like this, it could drag the country into decline." The hero snapped. He was petrified of it. He dropped into a deep bow and implored them, voice raw and urgent, to trust him. Hero's trick blindsided them. There's no way his request is what they need right now. He's been dragged back to the table, teeth clenched, forced to haggle against his will. Every wish and helping hand screamed the same truth. He saw them as kindred spirits. He refuses to betray his feelings. They're his closest allies. Simon snapped, "Stop! Grow up!" His father and grandfather had sowed wheat too, and both finally conceded the whole thing was hopeless. Hiro swore, thunder in his voice, that such failures would never be repeated. Simon hesitated, then shoved aside his doubts and chose to believe him. He had said it himself. They'll sow wheat and tell him to lift his chin. If he doesn't, he looks terrible, and nobody's going to beat him here. He ripped out a raw thank you, every syllable heavy with gratitude. Long ago, Simon would have recoiled in disgust at this. Suddenly, a sharp complaint sliced the air from behind. The workers flat out refused to grow wheat once the prince exposed their total cluelessness about agriculture. He bellows that the royal family isn't starving. That's exactly why he's saying it. They've thrown caution to the wind. Fate can take them, but they'll stop anyone from using their fields. The hero's words slam into a brick wall. He won't be able to convince them. If he fails this, every path forward slams shut for him. Simon bellowed, demanding everyone's attention. "I won't peddle the nonsense that the hero is clueless about agriculture or deaf to the suffering of ordinary people." Hands flew to ears as Simon's voice tore through the air. He roared for them to never forget who shared knowledge during the crop failure. The very person whose wisdom turned the crisis around. It was the hero! He lacked Takumu's brother's crushing strength. He lacked Agatha's brother's razor intellect. To this country he offered nothing. He'd never known real suffering, so he wasn't bound to weather their hardships. But he and the others sweated and gritted their teeth, burning to forge a better country. You heard their complaints spill out, and you offered a way to make things better. Their heads dropped, and Simon snapped, telling them to look at the iron hose they had. He branded himself helpless and frittered away every chance, flailing whenever he tried to act. He's clawing at his memories, desperate to erase the truth that he's helpless. The kingdom had no skilled doctors left, so the hero prince stood alone as its healer, personally tending every sick soul. When illness felled Simon's mother, he stayed at her bedside for 3 sleepless days and nights, nursing her back to health, and it's only thanks to him that she's alive and well. Anyone who says he doesn't care about what happens to people is completely stupid. Complacency gripped his thoughts, and he let it, because that was all he could do. Simon trusted him. He was a hero prince. Together they dared, together they saved. The instant Takumu proclaims everything's fine and crowns wheat above potatoes, he'll trail after him like a shadow. Then, every option erased, they pinned their trust on him. Everyone around fell mute, thoughts roaring behind their eyes. A bolt of certainty struck Hiro. He had to speak. Silence swallowed his words. He didn't know what to say. A tidal wave of emotion crashed through him and he lost all control. For the first time, an unfamiliar rush crashed through him. The workers surged toward him. They swallowed their pride and apologized for every word they'd unleashed. They'd cracked every secret, but growing wheat still refused to obey. 5 years ago, one of the men watched his younger brother starve to death, and he himself teetered on the brink of death, a memory that haunted him every moment. Fear shot through them, and they wrote it off as hopelessly unreliable. They tore into the hero prince for doing good, never once stopping to think. Hero flashed a fierce, reassuring smile, told them he understood their fear, and swore he'd never let them down. Joy exploded among the workers as they surged forward, determined to sow fields of wheat. Then Hero announced he'd brought something. He burst in, cradling steaming loaves of bread baked from the just harvested potatoes. It exploded with flavor. If they plant wheat, they'll reap so much grain they'll have mountains of bread. If you can cut through the chaos and read their true heart, everything falls into place. He swore he'd never break their faith, plotted double and triple-layered precautions to keep them from worrying, and vowed to push himself even harder this time. It strides down the corridor, Agatha right at its side, and then he declared he'd done well. Hero roared to Agatha that if he were in her shoes, he'd have personally won everyone over. Hero swayed them with nothing but a silver tongue, and it would have been better if he'd been beaten. Use this opening right, and Simon, the community's heavy hitter, will lock his loyalty down tighter than ever. Then every resident will rally around the hero with fierce devotion, lifting him to the throne. You recoiled at how selfish it sounded. Politics thrives on exactly that. Second, this matters more than anything. Agatha fought to spit the words out. He was terrified of something inside the hero. Hero pressed again, eyes boring into Agatha. Are you really afraid of me? He cemented his words with unshakable conviction. Hero grinned and shouted he loved what he did. He'd spent years helping all kinds of people. From the nation's giant stage, these are tiny sparks that don't even register. Combined, they unleash a colossal, unstoppable force. The people's trust, everything hinges on it. They hang on his every word and follow him. But trust isn't gained in one day. It's a forged, unshakable treasure and the most powerful weapon anyone can possess. If the hero claims the crown, he must never forget that the complacency he spoke of has morphed into trust. If he seizes it, this country could be torn apart and reborn. Every step he's taken so far carved meaning into his story. None of it was wasted. It wasn't for nothing. Maybe Hero had spent all this time aching to hear those exact words finally spoken to him. Agatha tore through every secret to expose the weapon he wielded before he became king. Alchemy is just a tool. If he wants to remake the country, he has to think far beyond it. Dread hardened in his chest at how easily Hero could win people's trust, and Agatha ordered him to never forget it. If he forgets, Mercy dies. He won't forgive him, and he'll seize this country. Brother Agatha's eyes locked onto him at last. Now the hero is in his debt. They refuse to hide. They blaze into the world as their true selves, stripped of every scrap of shame. He'll hold fast to who he is. Only by staying himself can he earn their trust. If he loves his country, that love will fuel him to remake the nation. In the field, the hero stormed from row to row, pressing leaflets into the hands of every worker who stared down at the pages, baffled by the writing. At first light the next day they swarmed the fields, sowing wheat across every acre, and he seized command of the planting, enforcing flawless technique and proper fertilization of the soil. This year he spearheads the process. Next year he'll groom villagers to take his place. One explanation won't cut it, so he hands out clear, step-by-step instructions. Simon slammed the bell and proclaimed the day's work done. They hurled themselves at the task, and a few even planned to kneel and pray for victory. Hero warned that biting cold devastates wheat, but insisted it can actually thrive in frigid temperatures. The workers' jaws dropped when Hero grasped every last detail. Simon blurted, "I don't have to go back to the castle, do I?" Hero confessed his life had exploded into a relentless, non-stop whirlwind. A surge of completion fills the air as the tunnel inches forward day by day and the wheat crops swell toward a golden harvest. Before winter arrives, the fields erupt with golden ears of grain, standing tall and proud. Joy exploded like fireworks as everyone realized they'd soon be harvesting row after row of tasty wheat. The hero's heart pounded for the day the wheat shot up and the whole country exploded into smiles. Hiro perched in his office as the clock screamed. Dinner time was already here. Hibana knocked on his door, pushed it open, and swept into his office. She didn't even step inside. She crumpled to the floor. Hiro sprang to his feet and cried out, "Are you okay?" She crumpled under crushing fatigue and blacked out for a while. Hibana hit the ground, battered and bruised, beaten again. This time she finally reeled Takuma in. Hiro ripped open the tube and began slathering the ointment onto her wound. An instant relief washed over her. Pain flared through her, so she pleaded for gentler hands. Hiro finished with her back and snapped. "Apply it to the front yourself." She blurted, "Do we smear the front too?" He snapped that it couldn't be done until after the wedding. A royal surprise announcement hit like a thunderclap. She'd been dying to hear it. She landed the hook. Now they have a real shot at winning. She could strike him mid-acceleration, pouring every ounce of her equipment's power into the blow. That was already impressive, and Hiro leaned in, asking if she'd noticed anything else interesting. And she only said, "Takumu has perfect coordination." The first time she faced him, her arms and legs were dead weight. But today, on the third day of training, she finally landed a single solid blow. If this keeps up, in the remaining 3 days she'll be able to completely defeat him. It crackled with promise, and Hiro's pulse surged. She couldn't wait to seize victory. He snapped back to her words. 8 of the Golden Knights couldn't defeat her. And blurted, "What about the other 4? She sensed their strength nearly matched hers. The knights wielded the same number of holy swords, but 8 of them outshone the rest. She'd bet her life, hand him a sword and he'd carve his way to victory too. Ranks threaded the Golden Knights and he pressed her. Where did Takuma stand against them? Even if his enemies wielded holy blades, he'd have cut down 5 of them. Yet the last 3 would have overwhelmed him. The trio hailed as the 3 holy swords are in a class of their own. If Brother Takumu gripped the magic sword Hiro forged, he could shatter the 3 sacred swords. Hibana shrugged and admitted he might have snatched victory, or been swallowed by defeat. Until today, Hiro only suspected his brother was strong, and couldn't tell if that strength meant anything on the world stage. Now he knows. His brother's raw power rivals the Golden Knights. If they rope Takuma into the plan, their odds of pulling it off skyrocket. The country's biggest threat. Neighboring nations will pounce the moment they catch wind of its riches. When the stakes are high, win with wit. Outsmart the problem, don't batter it with force. A surge of voices demanding victory at any cost drowned out the few who said the war was unnecessary. They'll fight only as a last resort. They chase every peaceful option first, but keep a hidden ace tucked in their sleeve. If they had Takumu, who could match the 3 holy swords in strength, and Hibana, who could surpass him, then 2 people in this country could rise to the 3 holy swords level and maybe bring the Golden Knight Order to its knees. Hibana snarled that it was arrogant to think the 2 of them could defeat the Golden Knights. They needed at least one more person. Hibana declared, "It will be the hero." Hiro refused. No sword, not even a first-class blade, could make him the best. Hibana's jaw snapped shut. His fighting style would let him go toe-to-toe with them, and that would be enough. Hiro scoffed. He might exist, but he's not needed. We had to put Alchemical silver to the test and see exactly how deadly its fighting power was. He blurted, "Don't change your clothes in my room," his voice tight with embarrassment. She shot back, "What's wrong with that? We'll probably end up living together anyway." She was fiercely headstrong, and with no questions about the gear, he barked, "Don't waste time. Tell me what happened." Hibana's voice sliced the silence. One burning request tore from her lips. She asks him to christen her blade. It's an important gift from the man she trusts with her life. And calling it just a magic sword slashes its heart. He forged the blade just for her, then boldly asked to be the one to name it. Bingo. Hibana had been daring him to call him that. He asked why. She shot back, sentimentality. He still couldn't wrap his head around it. But if it makes her smile, he'll conjure the answer from thin air without a second thought. Then his eyes snapped to Hibana. Hibana's eyes clung to her sword, and a switch flipped inside the hero, igniting an unshakable resolve. He spat the name Hanabi. "I christen this blade Hanabi." He leaned in, eyes alight, and said Hanabi means sparkling fireflowers bursting into bloom across the night sky. Utterly breathtaking. Hibana's sword spat sparks with every strike, so he decided the name fit. The explanation landed, and her gaze snapped to her sword. The sky's fiery blooms sounded like a love song, and she burned to see them. The hero roared, "It's not impossible!" She crushes Takuma in the duel, and that evening they explode into a wild celebration, launching fireworks into the sky. If she loses, nothing happens. They'll tear into their mistakes and fix them. Hibana swore she'd never lose. Yet watching her fight with a blade whose name she didn't even know tore at the heart. Clocks at 3 days. Pulling off a complex fireworks spectacle now would be absolute madness. But even so, he can take it. He burns to see Hibana admiring him. When she watches the fireworks, they pale beside her. She's the real spectacle lighting up the night. She snapped, "No time to rest," and dropped into a blazing set of push-ups. Hiro Aster forced himself to stop. He refused to overdo it. Today, Hibana and Takumu finally clash in their long-awaited duel. Prince Hiro burst onto the scene and the rest surged in his wake. The crowd exploded into gasps as Princess Nayuki stepped into view. Many were seeing her for the first time. Nayuki locked eyes with them and shot a sly wink. Shame slammed into the soldiers, their faces flushing crimson in an instant. They roared her name in unison, and Rebecca's eyes snapped to them. She came alive, razor-focused, exactly where she belonged. Takumu stood poised in the arena as the hero and Hibana vaulted up onto the platform beside him. Hiro relives the day Hibana and Takumu first clashed in a brutal, unforgettable showdown. Today, the scales hang dead even. Both stand with the same shot at victory. Agata will watch Takumu and Hiro collide in a fierce clash. Hibana, the hero's knight, storms into the duel and takes the fight herself. This isn't a game. It's a deadly duel with real swords, and victory is sealed the instant a single crushing sword blow lands. The loser tosses aside his claim to the throne. Agatha's second prince has already surrendered his right of succession. He thundered that the winner would instantly become the next king, then snapped, "Any objections?" Hiro didn't even flinch. Takumu stayed quiet, his single nod killing any chance of protest. He cast his fate into the blade's steel heart, and the hero pledged his destiny to the sword that stood as his knight. With every last detail locked in, he spun to his brother and asked, "Are you ready?" He snapped, "Hold on, just a second." He implored Hiro and his knight to seize victory in this duel. Everyone gaped. Takumu hardly ever wants to lose. Their voices made it obvious they'd agreed beforehand, so Kumu snapped, "I'm not giving up!" He demanded he prove his convictions in combat. And if he couldn't surpass him, then the hero's views will crash into insignificance. They had to vanish. Only that could protect him and save the country. Then he'll personally rise to claim the crown and become the country's king. Hiro responded with a single steely nod. If he topples Takuma will admit his beliefs are true, and hand him the subordinates he forged with his own hands. He snapped, "Look closely, don't miss a single detail." He charges into battle, unleashing every ounce of power with cold, unwavering resolve. The moment someone finally eclipses him, he'll have no choice but to recognize the hero. The rest of the soldiers erupted into a single thunderous roar, all cheering Commander Takuma's name. Every one of Takumu's followers aches to see him unleash his power. Belief in Takuma burns in them, and they roar with joy at the thought of watching him unleash his full strength in battle. He burns to witness a power that will eclipse him. Hiro's gaze snapped to Hibana. He swung to Takumu and declared he'd heard every word. Now the only thing left was for Takumu to win. Hiro jabbed at his phone, calling Hibana, but the ringtone fell into a mute void. She didn't answer. Then he yanked her by the shoulder. Terror ripped through her. Grinning, he asked her, "Are you afraid?" She owned up to being terrified, but the shock blasted the fear out of her, and now everything was normal. She throws on a brave face, and every fake act forges a fierce, real confidence inside her. Hibana isn't a kid anymore. She's burst into adulthood, fierce and unshakable. Hyrule barked at her, "Go, and come back victorious." She shot him a sharp nod and surged toward the arena. Takumu dared her to prove she was superior. Alone she couldn't fend him off. Her newfound strength flared, yet he still crushed her. With the hero at their side, they claw victory back and refuse to let go. After those words, they snapped into fighting stances. Agatha's voice cut through the hush. "Let the duel begin." Hibana exploded forward, unleashing a blistering attack. She slammed the acceleration function into motion. It ignites the brain and the body's inner current, sharpening dynamic vision and turning reflexes into lightning-fast precision. She lunges first. Takumu's wide open. This is her one shot. Miss now and she's dead. Hibana exploded into a lightning-fast assault, but Takumu slid aside and evaded the blow. Back then, the only person she could reel in was her brother. Now her eyes lock on him, catching every twitch and shift. It wasn't just the hero. Everyone else stood transfixed, eyes glued to the scene. In Nayuki's eyes, Hibana radiates pure cool, while Takumu, after stepping back, keeps slipping and dodging every strike. She ramped up the onslaught, each blow landing with growing, bone-crunching force. Takumu slid up behind her and snapped into a razor-sharp fighting stance. He leveled the sword at her, blade a-dare, and she spun to face him. He snatched his guard up at the last heartbeat and barely blocked the blow. She slammed her sword up and deflected the incoming strike. She brought him to a dead stop with nothing but the hilt of her sword. Takumu was already convinced they could end it here. Hibana slammed onto the arena's rim. Then in a heartbeat, she vanished from Takumu's sight. She darted into a blind spot. Any attack from there would go unseen. She hovered inches behind him, heartbeat thundering, already convinced her fingers could finally brush his skin. She steeled herself, lunged, and sank a blade into his back. In a heartbeat, Takumu blinked out from beneath the sword's swinging arc. Suddenly, he loomed directly behind Hibana. She lingered just out of sight. He locked onto her position and sketched the trajectory it would carve. He lunged and swung at her. The blade hurtled straight at Hibana. Hiro roared at Hibana, bellowing, "React faster!" She lunged, trying to parry the blow and cleave the sword in two. The sword's tip whistled inches from the Ku's face, and everyone around froze in stunned silence. He grinned, then a bullet ripped straight through his chest. Takumu crumpled to the ground as blood erupted, spraying from his body. Hibana Clifford clinched victory! Hiro bolted for the arena, lungs burning and heart hammering as he raced to his brother. He strode up to him, yanked a flask free, and emptied it onto Takumu's wound. He was instantly whole, and the wound stitched itself shut right before our eyes. The hero pressed, "Are you okay?" He stared at the healed wound, and the truth hit him. It bore the unmistakable mark of magic. The surface wounds have sealed, but he must lie low for the next few days. Those injuries finish healing in 3 days. The battle chewed through Hibana's sword and armor, leaving the blade dulled and the armor battered. They proved rock solid. He hauled himself to his feet and, voice raw, admitted he'd been utterly crushed, envisioning the catastrophe. If a magic blade smashed into an ordinary sword, he held back in the duel. But Hibana's counterattack shredded his caution and blew past every expectation. The instant he snapped her blade aside, the fight's fate was sealed. He whipped around to the crowd. Every eye had watched it all. He spat. "Do I look like an idiot for handing my opponent the win?" Armed with the sword and gear Hiro forged, Hibana dragged the fight back to even ground. "Put your faith in this power and pour your strength straight into the hero." Takumu implored him to infuse them with his power, vowing they'd wield that strength for good, for his sake. Hiro sprang to his feet and vowed he'd do it. He vowed to Takumu and his fighters he'd wield those powers to resurrect the country. He urges them to seize his knowledge and forge it into power that makes them stronger than ever. His words struck like thunder, and the crowd exploded into a roaring wave of delight. Takumu urged everyone to congratulate the hero on becoming the next king. No reward would come, but they could at least snatch a little celebration. The hero's gaze snapped to Hibana. She was still sitting, completely unmoving. "Then you steeled yourself and strode up to her." He dropped down beside her, gratitude flooding his voice as he thanked her for the victory. It felt unreal. She was still breathing. She'd already resigned herself to death. Then absurd luck let her parry that lethal blow. Hiro roared that it wasn't luck. Luck hadn't saved her. She surged into power. The knight hero now carries the weight of everyone's expectations. Delight surged through her when she heard that. People sprang into motion, unfolding tables and setting them into place with urgent, practiced hands. Takumu bellowed a feast into being, waving them forward to eat their fill with no limits. The maids burst in, hauling a stack of beer and plates heaped with a towering mound of boiled potatoes. With every mouthful they devoured, their hunger withered away. The long-awaited event finally exploded into life. But the potatoes hit like cardboard, completely, shockingly tasteless. Even the hero craves salt, a sharp, gnawing hunger tearing at them. They should have settled this before planting potatoes. But both wheat and potatoes were needed, and Nayuki and Rebecca barreled toward them. The two of them exploded into cheers, congratulating Hibana on her victory. She emerged victorious, but joy refused her. With an ordinary sword, she would have fallen without a chance. Even if that's true now, next time under the same conditions, they'll steamroll to a guaranteed victory. Nayuki declared Hibana's fighting phenomenal, and Hibana's face lit up as she thanked him. By now, not a single potato remained. Every last one had been devoured. It tasted awful, but when it ended, my chest tightened with a sudden aching sorrow. My jaw dropped when Hiro suddenly demanded to cook more. Nayuki crushed the worry with a calm smile, and Rebecca nodded, letting them haul it in. Half the potatoes were already pressed into service for Takumu's victory feast. Nayuki clutched hope like a lifeline, begging them to love every single thing. Hiro lifted the lid and astonishment exploded inside her. I tore it open and there they were, real croquettes hiding inside. She whipped them up herself. This was the exact dish Hiro had raved about earlier. Takumu surged towards the table, his eyes locked on the mouth-watering spread as a rich, savory scent hit his nose. Agatha's jaw hit the floor. She'd never seen anything like it, and every inch was carved from potatoes. Hiro roared, "It's better to eat it with your hands!" He snatched the croquette wrapped in a napkin and chomped off a bite. They reveled in the flavor as oil gushed out and the edges snapped with a loud, satisfying crunch. Takumu leaned in, eyes alight, and asked Nayuki, "Did you make this mouth-watering treat?" Joy exploded in her chest when Takumu praised her. Rebecca's grin cracked wide, her heart leaping at the sight of Nayuki beaming with pure joy. These potato croquettes emerged flawless, crispy golden shells cracking open to reveal pillowy, buttery centers. As the housewife salted the goat's meat, a ribbon of fat stayed behind. She scooped it up, pressed it into use, and seasoned it with a pinch of salt. She pounded the potatoes with salt, meat, and milk until they collapsed into soft, crumbly clouds, then grabbed flour and eggs and dried the bread into crunchy breadcrumbs. Turning only second-rate ingredients into a mouth-watering feast is a brutal challenge, but tell people, and they'll erupt with joy. She slammed an iron pan onto the fire and flooded it with oil. Iron pans were scarce in the city. To get enough fat, she pounded through piles of goat meat. She laughed and admitted, this method still slays even without frying. Rebecca lunged at Nayuki, seizing his arm and snarling, "No king gets to make a princess cry." He shot back instantly. Turning plants into oil was a breeze, but iron was a far trickier beast. Not a single mine stirs in this country, so iron is painfully scarce. Enrichment begins in earnest. Preparing for war will demand mountains of iron. They can just import it from neighboring countries, but scooping up massive iron shipments triggers fierce pushback and gets them branded as hostile by other nations. If war erupted, he'd first move to secretly hoard a mountain of iron. Lost in that plan, Nayuki snapped at him to stop worrying. He apologized, voice cracking, and confessed it wasn't about the dish. It was the iron requirement, and he vowed they'd claim it any day now. At last, iron pots and knives will thunder into people's homes. The heroes look like they're hatching an impossible plan. Today the hero seized the throne, so Agatha pleaded with him not to anger either the new king or Takuma. Glasses rang out as he vowed to Agatha, and they dove back into the feast. Nayuki stunned everyone, pulling off a wildly complex dish nobody thought she could cook. She's loaded with solid knowledge and her words blaze with expressiveness. Instantly you know she's a bookworm. She hurled herself into helping them, and Hiro asked if she should walk away from the country's political turmoil. Agatha fired back instantly. "I'm against it!" The hero read him like a book. He refused to fling her into the spotlight. He wouldn't use his sister, but doubt gnawed at him. Was condemning her to the kitchen really right? Then Nayuki herself sprinted up to them. She said she'd talked enough and was running on empty, so she decided to head back to her place. She staggered back and planted her foot square on the glass on the floor. Her foot betrayed her. She skidded on it and went sprawling. Hiro and Agatha lunged together, hands shooting out to snatch her. Right then they dove and snatched her up, stopping her from plummeting. They locked eyes, surprise exploding across their faces. Then they erupted into wild, roaring laughter. Rebecca barreled up and asked if everyone was okay, but the brothers had already caught her and stopped her from falling. An odd electric jolt ripped through me. So strange, since we'd always been at odds. Every minute we spent together exploded with fun. The hero snapped his agreement. Nayuki had been their messenger before, but they barely ever met up. Nayuki then pouted, declaring their relationship a wreck and that she'd always bent over backwards to get along with both of them so they'd become one. He swallowed his pride and apologized, guilt burning because she always had to stand between them and mend the rift. Agatha barked that he was heading back to the castle. Unfinished work was still waiting for him. Hiro flashed a grin and urged Agatha and Nayuki to hold on a moment. He had something amazing to show them. Curiosity exploded. They crowded around, burning to see what he'd cooked up. Hiro planted himself in the center of the arena and thundered out to every person there. He boomed that he'd prepared a surprise to honor today's showdown between Hibana and Takumu. He bellowed for them to turn their eyes to the flag. He bolted backstage, snatched the chain, and blasted a surge of current through it. Out of nowhere, the backstage cannons roared to life, slammed around home and blasted it into the sky. Shells screamed across the dark sky, shredding the silence. They burst into a colossal, breathtaking fireworks spectacle, painting the night with thunderous color. From the crowded tables at the feast to the simple peasants in the lanes, every eye locked onto it. Fireworks exploded, spilling color and light past the kingdom's borders. Hibana said it would happen. A blazing blossom burst into the sky, fireworks exploding all around it. It dazzled, pure jaw-dropping beauty. The crowd went silent, jaws dropping, as the sky exploded into dazzling light. Takumu, too, couldn't believe he'd actually pulled it off. Agatha's breath caught. She'd never laid eyes on anything like it. "Nayuki insisted on one more watch!" The guards sat frozen, slack-jawed, as fireworks ripped the sky and stole their breath. The air shimmered with warm, cheerful energy. If the crowd had hated the fireworks, the whole night would have been for nothing. But that wasn't the case. The air buzzed with cheers, and everyone was unmistakably happy. Hibana stepped up to Hiro, eyes alight, and declared the fireworks breathtaking. She vowed she'd never forget them. Hiro confessed it was a brutal grind to make, so he's buzzing that everyone loved it. They christened the Hibana sword for a beauty that stole every breath. The owner of that very sword rivaled the fireworks in beauty, dazzling everyone like a living burst of light. Joy surged through her. She branded herself unworthy of that name. For now. She'll keep fighting, pouring everything into every attempt until he finally unveils a fireworks display even more breathtaking, just for her. Anticipation crackled through Hiro. He couldn't wait. A flash hit Hibana. He'd sworn that if he seized the wheat, he'd throw a roaring harvest festival. And there he'd proclaim his coronation to everyone. Never before has this land seen a feast like the one about to erupt. Long tables will hold neat rows of bread, flagons of ale, and steaming seafood. The holiday will erupt into a roaring success as fireworks set the sky ablaze. The celebration will leave every face beaming. It sounds syrupy and rough to rot your teeth, but Hiro gritted his jaw and did it anyway. When the festival hits, their granaries will be bursting with millet. They'll have dug a tunnel straight to the sea, tapped a salt supply, and at last haul fresh seafood onto their tables. Their wealth will skyrocket! When winter hits, they'll be buried in food, stashing the rest away for later. He vowed to deliver this very future to every last one of them. It all sounded insanely cool. He refuses to settle for mere existence. He believes happiness is real, and he's going to ignite that truth in every heart at the Harvest Festival. He found a shared, blazing goal for them, and he'll charge toward it no matter what. Only by grinding with relentless grit can he ignite joy in people's hearts. The fireworks painted the night in blazing circles, and Hibana's curiosity flared. Were those perfect rounds and molten colors crafted by chemistry? Hiro barked it was pure chemistry. A huge circle set the shape, crammed with tiny powder balls, and when they ignited special metals, those balls erupted into a blazing, fiery color. He unleashed a fireworks spectacle that lit the night. At the Harvest Festival, he's poised to outshine even that. Villagers still claw through winter, but a brutal lack of food has silenced the Harvest Festival for 20 years. Hibana beamed and vowed she'd give it her all if he let her watch his fireworks again. Hiro asked if she was still full. She shot back, "Not at all, I'm always hungry." Then gushed that Princess Nayuki's croquettes were absolutely delicious. Then he leaned in with a mischievous grin and shot, "Dessert, what do you think?" The moment she heard dessert, her face exploded into a gleeful grin. Weeds choked every inch of ground around them. This place wasn't a normal farm, it was an experimental farm. Hibana's imagination ignited as she pictured what she could forge from the humble wheat. He shot back that it wasn't just wheat. There was a bigger reason behind it. He beckoned her to the door. Her gaze locked onto a cluster of towering glass skyscrapers shimmering on the distant horizon. They looked strange at first. Step inside and your jaw drops at the even bigger surprises. They burst inside and gaped at the colossal fruits towering before them. It revealed itself, a single fruit, a melon. Their scent slammed into you, so sweet it sent your head spinning. This fruit hails from the Far East and is a rare prize here, while melons go for pocket change. He secured their seeds with a single, wildly unconventional gambit. She demanded, "What other method?" Suspicion crackling in her voice. She inhaled, mouth watering as the fruit's scent slammed into her. Pure luxury. They had to be wildly expensive. She'd never smelled sweetness like that in her life. A hungry rumble erupted from her stomach. Choice evaporated. In their country, sweets are a rare luxury they can hardly ever enjoy. Eagerness crackled through her as she asked if she could try it right away. Hiro shot back, "I can choose anyone." Zeroed in on the biggest one and snatched it. But then I realized the field had no land, no soil underfoot, yet fruit still managed to grow here. He slammed down a note that read, "It's called hydroponics." She clung to the idea that cultivation was just water and fertilizer. Crops only thrived in fertile soil, so she saw no other way. She snapped, "Why can't anyone see you from outside?" He shrugged and shot back, "Just a precaution." The hydroponic rig was impossibly complex to build, so folks whispered he pulled it off with alchemy. Sometimes the hero vanishes into himself, folding inward until only his thoughts remain. Before he even planted a single seed, he pictured them luring foreign capital and turning into show-stopping gifts for landmark celebrations. Hibana lit up. Thanks to Hiro, she'd finally tasted that heavenly treat. And she swore she'd never tell a soul. She zeroed in on the sweetest-looking prize and ripped back the curtain. "It's the night sixth sense," she inhaled, the scent flooding her senses like a warm tide. And she asked if Hiro would be there too. He snapped, "Isn't one enough for two?" He urged them to devour it whole. A grin split her face and she leapt at the chance, shouting, "Yes!" The hero snatched a knife and first split the melon straight down the middle. I ripped the seeds free and split them into 4 equal piles. At last, the melon was safe, ready for anyone to sink their teeth into without a single worry. The moment the blade split it, the melon burst into an even richer, intoxicating sweetness. Hiro snapped, "Take the piece in your hand and sink your teeth into it. Bite boldly." She snatched one, lifted it to her mouth, and let her teeth sink in. She sank her teeth into the melon, sweet juice exploding across her tongue. The taste exploded across its tongue. It howled the instant it hit. It hit like liquid gold, rich syrupy sweetness that gushes out with every bite. It hit my tongue velvet soft and just dissolved. The outer side held firm, rock solid. Hiro snapped, "Don't eat it, it's just the peel." Time bled away, but a massive chunk of it refused to vanish. They tore into the melon and polished off every last bite. At last, they tore into it and devoured every last bite. She bit in like she'd found heaven and crowned it a true fruit of paradise. She declared she'd never been so glad she'd followed him. And the admission stung. She burned to share that mouth-watering treat with everyone. But the hero's gut would not the moment anyone found out. He imagined the yo as a coveted trophy, thrust into the hands of anyone who proved greatness on the battlefield or wrested bounty from the earth, convinced it would ignite a hunger for glory. Hibana looked like she'd kill for this melon, and the hero begged her not to joke like that. Her eyes widened as flavor exploded across her tongue. She'd never in her life tried anything like it before, and she loved it. Today she beheld the most beautiful thing a human life can know and savored a flavor so divine it stole her breath. You told yourself one small indulgence wouldn't hurt, so you bestowed it upon her as a reward. She'll have to push herself to the breaking point to claim a reward like that. Then she caught a faint scent drifting in from far away. She jabbed a finger toward the building and snapped, "What's that smell?" The hero snapped, "There's actually something special there." He ripped the door open and gasped at a towering wall of barrels cramming the room. "Now's the moment. Rip it open and taste what's inside." A pleasant, intoxicating scent slammed into him, almost indistinguishable from alcohol. Melancholy pooled in the cellar. He'd grown a mountain of melons he couldn't devour, and the leftovers wouldn't all compost, so he hatched a plan to brew a melon tincture. Delicious beyond belief, but something he couldn't dare show anyone, and Hibana gaped. Stunned, he'd once planned to toss such treasure. She'd unraveled every truth, yet pity still squeezed her heart. She craved this melon like it was the center of her world. He locks the tincture in the cellar every year, and when its taste silences every doubt, he finally unveils it to the people. Hibana gritted her teeth and swore she'd wait for that day to come. She leaned in and asked to taste the tincture. Hiro's prediction slammed into the bullseye. He shrugged and told her to skip it if she didn't like it. He'd tailored the tincture to his own taste. Only Hibana's determination burned in her bones. She alone would try it. She tasted it, and an intense, concentrated rush of melon exploded across her tongue. They pulverized the melon, then watched its pulp fizz and ferment into the tincture's heart. It tasted like candy. Her first ever sip of sweet alcohol, and she could chug an absurd amount. Turning sweet fruit into booze is brutal. Yeast devours the sugar and erases the sweetness. But if a melon is super packed with sugar, you can slam the brakes on fermentation and lock that sweetness into the alcohol. He didn't just make a sweet, he brewed a rich, layered tincture, and she burned with impatience to drink her fill of that sugary alcohol. She flashed a hopeful grin and blurted, "Can I have another mug?" He shrugged and tossed out, "Drink if you want." The words dismissed before they even landed. She kept gulping it down. They slammed their mugs together in a ringing toast, laughter exploding with every clink. They slammed back drink after drink. Hiro couldn't imagine this would explode into a full-blown catastrophe. Hibana crashed onto the hero, locked onto his eyes and whispered, "Your eyes are beautiful." He never imagined he'd slam back an entire mug. She felt heat slam into her. His skin was very warm, too. The liquor slides down sweet and easy but packs more punch than ale, because a large amount of sugar quietly fermented into alcohol and you didn't even notice. She'd downed bottle after bottle and was still staggering, and he asked if she could go sleep it off. Ibane hesitated for a heartbeat, then locked eyes with him. She reached out and pressed her fingers to his lips. She'd been burning to ask for a very long time. Why does his hand freeze instead of reaching for her? She shoved the words out, "I love you," and bared her whole heart to him. He blurted, "You mean that time you changed clothes right in front of me?" He'd been sure she didn't see him as the opposite sex. Reality slammed in. Shame surged through her, too. Then he pressed her to say it straight. She still couldn't force the word "come" past her throat. She hurled the question at Hiro. "Do you even like me?" He blurted that he really liked her. She was his dear friend. She asked, "Am I just a friend?" He met her stare and admitted his heart felt nothing beyond friendship. He lingered a beat, then conceded, "There's a bit of that." Her beauty and charm slam into him, and sometimes he has to clamp down with every ounce of will. He'd never say this sober, but he's drunk now. Hibana closed the distance and asked, "Are you okay with this?" She aches for him to claim every inch of her. Hiro's throat clenched. He let out a hard gulp and confessed, "I want that too." It's impossible, and she feels that truth drop like lead into her gut. He swore he'd remake the country and forge the strength to bring his first love back. Hibana's voice cracked as she demanded, "Do you truly love Princess Miri more than me?" Cluelessness gripped Hiro. He liked her so fiercely it crackled in the air. Shame slammed into Hibana. His own words left him mortified. She shot back, "Why not?" She'd already refused the crown and only offered to be his convenient figurehead. The memory clawed at him, a burden only he carried, and he realized his feelings for her had grown so fierce they dwarfed what he felt for his sister. Fear clawed at him. If he fell in love with someone else, his sister's memory would vanish inside him, and he realized he'd been talking too much lately, and he knew he shouldn't talk like that. What did he ever do to help her? He'd already thrown in the towel and turned his back. Hibana locked eyes with him, hanging on every word. The ground rips out from under him, his belief in himself shatters, and it's painfully clear he's already betrayed the faith they placed in him. They could bolt together, vanish into the night, and finally untangle the knot of feelings between them. He slammed the label on himself. "I'm a complete weakling." Disgust slammed into him, bile rising in his throat. Maybe by the time his eyes snapped to hers, Hibana's faith in him had already shattered. He gaped as she climbed toward him, arms pinned to her sides, no outstretched hands. She crushed him in a fierce hug and declared that everything was exactly the opposite. He ripped off his mask and exposed the silent weaknesses he'd never dared speak, and it wasn't fair. Hiro apologized. Relief surged through him the moment he realized she didn't hate him. Then he branded himself a complete egoist. Her voice stripped away his doubt. He knew what had to be done and vowed to rebuild the country from the ashes and bring Princess Emily home. After everything, Hibana begged him to give her that chance. He shrugged, unfazed, and nodded his agreement. With her at his side, he felt he could seize and shatter every obstacle, then begged everyone to pretend today never happened. Boogie had her pinned. She couldn't lift a finger to stop it. Every whisper he'd sworn was real shattered. It was all drunken delirium. She proved it, then she shut down, slipping into ice-cold silence. She toppled into his lap, eyelids snapping shut as sleep claimed her. This moment will be seared into Hiro's mind forever. How could you ever forget the words your girlfriend seared into your mind? She plunged into the tunnel, barreling toward the castle with Hibana on her back. This day will blaze into the hero's soul forever, yet he must put on the mask of forgetting. He vowed to her he'd come back for his sister. Then he'll be forced to stare their relationship down, turning every memory over in his head until the truth won't let him look away. 2 months have thundered past since Hibana's victory. Winter barrels toward us. Everything's hurtling forward at breakneck speed. Efforts to swell the nation's coffers and steal its army are roaring ahead. Hiro raced to the man's side and asked, "How are you feeling?" His father lay in the bed, hooked to an IV that dripped steadily into his arm, each slow drop landing like a punch. He sank into the chair and dove right back into explaining how he'd synthesize another version of the new drug. While the father slumbers, the whole country flips overnight. Not long ago, they carved a tunnel straight out to the sea. All the brothers and Hibana stood in the tunnel, eyes riveted to the blinding light pouring out from its depths. They stare at the magnificence and gasp, the air ripped from their lungs. In the Devil's Forest, you can even whip out a magic lamp and unleash its power. They poured every ounce of sweat and heart into this. They pulled off something wildly unusual. After finishing all the work, they swarmed the hero and demanded to know if a sea really lay beyond this cave, even though it was a tunnel, not a cave. A reply came. Everything was true. The sea awaited at the end, and unlike the lake, it teemed with far more fish. When the expedition group surged back from the sea, a wild commotion erupted as they hauled ashore mountains of fish and shellfish. They needed even more, so he snatched up a cart. Agatha barked, eyes blazing. "Where are the horses for the cart?" Hiro jabbed a finger at Takuma and Hibana and roared that they had someone faster and stronger than any horse. They exploded into a full-speed sprint forward. Hibana's eyes flashed. This was top-tier training. Takumu blurted his agreement to her and ran as fast as he could. Sometimes Agatha's eyes go wide, utterly amazed by it. Doubt slams into Hiro. They're not even sure they can stop them. Still, they're magnificent, yanking the cart out of the castle and hauling it ever farther. The cart glides like a phantom. No tremor, no wheel sound, and its power never falters. The tunnel's road is perfect. Hiro explained that if you put on tires, literally covers for the wheels, they crank up driving efficiency so you can rocket through. He clocked it. The cart, their combined strength, and the open road were hurling them along at about 50 kilometers per hour. Agatha's eyes flashed and she nodded. Those carriages would be incredibly useful. Hiro whipped up another design for Takumu, dead certain he'd hit on the perfect thing for him. Agatha will practically burst with gratitude for this. Mid-run, rivalry ignited as Hibana and Takumu pushed each other to the edge and dared to settle it in a duel. She swore she'd win. Losing face wasn't an option. He bowed low, respect blazing for that unshakable steadfastness. They absolutely crushed it! Hiro's convinced Takumu will still be stronger. They've already proclaimed their moments from arriving. At last they burst out of the tunnel. Before them, the sea arced away into the distance. The crowd erupted into cheers the instant they laid eyes on him. Eros grinned and tossed out, "Let's go fishing." They vowed to haul in a tidal bounty of fish, enough to feed themselves and to bring home for their wives. Everyone planted themselves, fingers flying as they rigged rods and baited hooks, eyes locked on the water, ready to fish. Everyone exploded into cheers, faces shining with pure, unstoppable joy. They'd blasted a tunnel and finally welded the country's heartland to the sea. Now they were ready to push even further. The sea wasn't the finish line, it was the launch pad, and countless greater goals waited ahead. A sudden memory slammed into him. He had to tell about the wheat. Every last soul poured into the fields, hands in the earth, working as one until dusk. At last, waves of golden wheat burst across Cartarosa. "The hour has come! We reap the harvest!" She leaned in, eyes blazing, and demanded, "How did you muster so many people?" He shot back they'd already hauled in every potato, and this harvest finally yielded the long-awaited wheat. When Hibana leaned in and asked what the device was, he flashed a grin and declared it a human-powered combine. "And what about the wheelbarrow with the blade sticking out of the end?" People muscle it forward, the blades slicing through crops and supercharging the harvest. At this rate, they'll set new harvest records. He's ecstatic they finally have wheat, and he welded a threshing machine right into the water wheel. He probably pushed things too far, and Agatha's not having it. He erupted at the hero for fabricating so much, slamming his fist and snarling, "What if another country noticed all this?" Hero swallowed his apology, but Takumu roared with laughter. The overflowing harvest was entirely his doing. One conclusion stands alone. This year they'll have enough food to feed every single person. Pioneering fertilizer breakthroughs blasted potato yields sky high. Their nets overflowing with fish, they eat far fewer potatoes, and the salt lets them turn every catch into pickled provisions. Now waves of golden wheat billow across their fields as they grow far more than before. Luck exploded in their favor, every loose end snapping tight until everything fell into place. The battle to slash food costs vanished. It's buried in the past. When they pass the food around, a massive surplus will pile up. They'll split it into two uses. First, they stockpiled supplies, bracing for war to erupt. Scouts sounded the alarm. Neighboring countries will attack in spring, so we must scramble to stockpile food now. They buy salt from their neighbors, and it's unthinkable they'll never notice their country's situation improving. It's only a matter of time. Rallying troops and hauling supplies devours precious time. To storm Cartarosa, you must force your way across the mountain barrier. In winter, snow buries the passes so deep you can't even get close. They're almost certain to unleash the invasion the moment spring arrives. They have until spring to forge themselves into a force fierce enough to topple their neighbors. They're already in full swing with the necessary preparations, hauling in food supplies. You must raise an army. Sure, their ranks will brandish magic swords, but even that won't be enough. He was determined to press Takuma into brutal winter training to prepare for war, and he'd see it done. When the war erupted, they'd smash everyone to smithereens, and they'll hand every stolen land and person back to their rightful owners. Hiro backed Takuma without hesitation. The lands taken from them brimmed with singular fertility and were home to over 2,000 people. He's hell-bent on rescuing his people from their suffering. Takumu launched into action immediately, the magic sword humming in their grip. Losing wasn't an option. Agatha shot up a hand and, voice sharp, urged them to slow down a little. Dread coiled in his gut. What if they stormed in from the other side? Their neighbors are warlike and unfriendly, but they still keep a fragile tie with them. If those neighbors strike from here, other countries will call for reinforcements. If they strike first and seize victory, they'll forge ties with neighboring states. Some countries will drop their allies the moment a convincing excuse appears. Hiro sensed the betrayal hid too many tangled reasons to unravel, so they refused to touch them. Agatha's words struck Takulu like lightning, and suddenly he understood everything. Agatha's eyes burned as she declared they still had a shot at winning the war. Then she turned to Hiro and asked him to forge a weapon that could crush their neighbors. He shot back that with spring still on the horizon, time was on their side. He's holding the plans. But they must haul in a mountain of iron first, or nothing gets built. They can't scrape up iron sand or import iron from foreign shores. Takumu's voice wavered as he asked if he'd make it in time, and the other man smiled, steady as iron, and said, "Don't worry." Out on the open sea, a sudden electrifying idea ignited in his mind. Agatha pinned every hope on him. They leaned in, electric with ideas, and vowed to explore another bold use for the food. His brother handed him the reins to orchestrate the Harvest Festival. The Harvest Festival promised not only a bountiful harvest, but a hard-earned rest for their beloved people. And he proposed it, yet doubt gnawed at him over spending their reserves to revive a festival cancelled 12 years ago. Now they hold the power to pull it off. They sweat and sacrifice to forge a prosperous nation, vowing they'll one day bring their sister home. His father will be thunderstruck the instant he wakes. When the dust settled, the hero squared his shoulders and stormed out. Today, the crown drags him into a whirlwind of royal affairs. The harvest festival crackled with electric energy. People tore into food, shouted and laughed, spun into dance and hammered out music. A carriage thundered out of the castle gates, wheels hammering the cobblestones. Inside them sat Hero and Hibana, eyes wide as the crowd erupted into laughter and revelry. Today's speech will ignite this holiday and turn every moment electric. Right here, I launch myself into scaling the stand. Soldiers spotted him first. The crowd erupted into a thunderous roar, drowning the streets with grateful shouts as they hailed the prince for saving the country. Suddenly someone roared, "Prince of Salt!" It was the crowning gift the prince had bestowed on them, and Hero couldn't fathom why anyone had dubbed him the Prince of Salt. They adore him, he restored their salt. Takumu declared himself proud. He'd lit up people's faces with smiles. The people's love is the nation's fiercest cure, mending wounds no medicine ever could. Nayuki chimed in with a wide grin, roaring his congratulations to the Prince of Salt. Hero's mind reeled. He couldn't fathom what kind of Prince of Salt he was. The crowd exploded into chants, dubbing him the Prince of Wheat. Another fresh nickname hits the scene. Takumu roared with laughter. The nickname fit him perfectly. Agatha hesitated, torn between Sultan and Wheat. Each nickname alone amounted to a hero's feat. Nayuki flashed a grin and proposed dubbing him the Prince of Salt and Wheat. The two chorused in perfect unison. Hero snapped, "Don't toy with names. They guard the salt, Agatha tends the wheat." He roared, demanding to know why every ounce of glory had been heaped onto his shoulders. Then he flashed a smile. He trusted the brothers' burning will to save the country, so he spilled every secret, and it proved the right move. Takumu leaned in, eyes burning, and urged him to continue. He snapped a curt nod, spun to face the crowd, and cleared his throat, seizing everyone's attention. He strode before the crowd and thundered, "I am the third prince, Hiro Kararosa." People knew him at a glance and watched him grow up right before their eyes. Hero drew a deep, steady breath, lungs filling like bellows before a storm. He roared, "From that day forward, I am the king of Cardarosa." His family and friends became a silent shield, holding him up without a single word. He dreams what the people dream and fights tooth and nail to make those dreams real, so he pours his thoughts out to them. I kicked things off by firing a blunt question at everyone. Has this country actually gotten any better? The crowd roared as one. The country was better now. They had salt, fish, bread. Then the hero's voice trembled as he begged, "Can this last forever?" The people roared back in perfect unison, "Yes!" The hero warned, jaw clenched, "This probably won't be easy." Some faces knitted in deep thought, others snapped wide-eyed with fear. Their country still has a long road ahead. They've loaded up on salt and food to last the whole winter. That's where it all ends, and rage boils in his veins. He craves richer feasts, non-stop thrills, and sumptuous comforts. He refuses to settle for mere survival. Simply not starving can't satisfy him. He slammed his palm and demanded to know if they'd downed the ale Nayuki had brewed. The taste hit like fireworks, and their joy skyrocketed. That's a lavish indulgence they can toss aside if all they want is to survive. It floods the nation with prosperity and sets every heart ablaze. Protecting this wealth, that's what being truly happy means. He's on a mission to enrich this country, and he's calling everyone else to join him. He will usher them into happiness. He refuses to be the country's savior. He's gunning for a better tomorrow. He roared to his entire nation, commanding them to rise up. He couldn't do it alone. His friends rallied to his side. That alone can't awaken the blade. He must draw the people's power. The people stood frozen, silence crushing them as their bodies trembled. A thunderous roar tore through the square. "Long live King Hero!" A grin exploded across his face as the dazzling reaction lit him up. They stare down death and hunger, eyes locked on the horizon, convinced tomorrow will be better. They drank in his words, convinced the future he painted would actually come true. Any moment now they will find themselves living like this. They'll rake in riches and beam with pure, unshakable joy. He vowed that if they followed him, he'd forge Cardarosa into a land of roaring prosperity. This was the moment he swore his first promise as king. The speech ended. Fireworks blasted overhead, shredding the night into a roaring storm of color. The soldiers nailed the fireworks, lighting the night sky ablaze with a thunderous cascade of color. Fireworks torch your cash and vanish in a blink. A radiant, inspiring sight strikes you. This waste is the very happiness he wants everyone to see. He clung to the hope that everyone who saw him would feel the storm churning inside. Someone whooped and yelled, "Congratulations! You're king now!" There it was, Hibana. She rolled her eyes and shot back that Hero was overthinking the festival again. Maybe he hungers for everyone's approval. Beside her, he feels unstoppable. Any road, any horizon, he can go anywhere. He begs her to follow him and never leave his side. His next goal is to seize iron, and he'll storm across the sea to the opposite shore to claim it. Hibana complied instinctively. She was his sword. That night they exploded into celebration, hope burning bright, and he rejoiced so fully the weight of years of pain fell from his shoulders. Saving isn't enough, surviving isn't enough. He's only just begun to live, and that's only the beginning. His goal blazes beyond the horizon. If he settles for the present, he'll freeze in place and never take another step toward it. Reborn as Prince Cartarosa, the hero charges forward, hell-bent on forging his country's prosperity.